Chapter 16:17. A ball of light brought the projection of the master of the Radiance Tower and the vampire girl Elizabeth to the ground slowly. Now, other than the knights who had lost their minds and lost their will, there were not many people left in the Holy Church. Lord Angel was silent at this moment. She even watched the holy knights being bullied without doing anything. This made the clergy in the team unable to let go of this feeling. However, at this moment, the first master of the Magician Association suddenly appeared. Was he an enemy or a friend? Since the Holy Church and the Magician Association had always been in a state of non-aggression, the master of the Radiance Tower knew what the remaining people of the Holy Church were feeling at this moment. During the process of landing, he had basically grasped the information on the scene, including Angel Hamileth, who had a gloomy expression at this moment. "Put away your crazy killing intent, Feral," the master of the Radiance Tower said calmly. "This is the inhuman domain, not your battlefield. Don't let me find a reason to expel you." As a man who could control the core of the inhuman domain, it was just a matter of raising his hand to expel someone from the inhuman domain. Of course, with Feral's strength, it was not impossible for him to barge in again without using the coordinates. Compared to something that would affect the stability of the inhuman domain, the master of the Radiance Tower preferred to have a good talk with Feral. The monstrous killing intent subsided bit by bit. The chaos and madness in the eyes of the Mad Knight also gradually returned to calmness. Feral sighed lightly. There was not much apology on his face, but he still said apologetically, "I didn't mean to cause you trouble, Master Hui Yao. I've looked for you before, but unfortunately, I missed you. I've known about your arrival for a long time. However, a lot of things have happened in the association recently." The master of the Radiance Tower did not say more. Feral nodded. "No matter what, you're still willing to see me. Master Hui Yao, I have something to discuss with you. If possible, I even plan to borrow the power of the Magician Association." The master of the Radiance Tower frowned, as if he was thinking about something. He did not immediately agree. "Vampire?" However, right at this moment, a confused voice sounded, and it was from Hamaliel. No matter how strong Hamlet was as a descending angel, as an angel, he was still able to sense the scent of the young vampire girl. In the first place, Elizabeth did not deliberately conceal her vampire aura. Perhaps it was because they were natural enemies, but Elizabeth was approaching the Radiance Pagoda Master with some fear. At this moment, the young ladies were enduring the gazes of everyone present. She was not used to this kind of attention and had a vague impulse to escape. But when she thought about how if Miss Yu was here, she would definitely not be afraid. Instead, she would magnanimously ignore everyone's gazes. She wanted to become an outstanding woman and was determined to use Miss Yu Yi as her role model. At this moment, she gritted her teeth and resisted the instinctive discomfort. She met everyone's gazes, and even the gazes of the angels. "This is my student." The master of the Radiance Tower casually glanced at Hamaliel and calmly said, "I know that the Heavenly Kingdom has always had some opinions about dark creatures, but strictly speaking, we magicians are also considered atheists." Anger flashed across Hamaliel's eyes. Within a day, no, within an hour, he actually met two humans who did not put the Heavenly Kingdom in their eyes. Feral was a madman who had been stimulated and whose brain was in a mess. That was fine, but this magician in front of him, a magician who was not rare in this kind of dimensional crevice, was indeed arrogant no matter which subworld he was in. However, magicians pursue the essence of everything and search for the path of truth. They did not see God. If there was a so-called belief, it was only the belief in the essence of everything. In a broad sense, they were equivalent to scientists who followed the rules of science. Magicians were obviously extraordinary scientists. Talking about belief with magicians would infuriate oneself to death. Even so, how could a magician look down on the Heavenly Kingdom? A cold light flashed across Hamaliel's eyes. Just as he was about to retort, a figure flashed in front of him. It was Feral in a wrinkled suit. "Angel, you are too noisy. You are disturbing me." Hamaliel's mind instantly went blank. Farrell's fist had already bombarded the body of the reincarnation medium. Gamaliel even felt that his divine soul was about to be blasted out of the medium by the opponent. He fainted and fell to the ground. "You have great strength, but you can't even use 30% of it." Farrell shook his head at this moment. "You only know how to use brute force." The moment this four-winged angel was knocked to the ground, a group of clergymen who were very firm in their beliefs collapsed and directly fainted on the ground. The originally powerful team of the Holy Church was now left with a pitiful 6 or 7 people who could barely stand, but their faces were all pale and in a state of trembling. Farrell sized them up, and his eyes flashed with disappointment. Then he slowly walked to the side of the Radiance Tower's master and also sized up Elizabeth, who was beside the master of the Radiance Tower. He frowned. "Master Radiance, is this your student?" "Elizabeth," the master of the Radiance Tower said indifferently. Farrell said with a straight face, "I was born slow-witted, and my methods are not brilliant. I only know a stupid method of selecting talents, so I can't see the potential of your student. But since she is the master's student, she naturally has some outstanding aspects." Listening to Farrell's words, even the only rational projection of the master of the Radiance Tower was unable to withstand at this moment. Could it be that this guy had no idea of his own strength at all? "Farrell, why are you looking for me?" "They are back." The master of the Radiance Tower knew what Farrell was referring to. This was the source of Farrell's half-crazy and half-awake state at this moment. "Evidence? I saw it with my own eyes. It's not fake." The master of the Radiance Tower was silent for a moment before slowly saying, "This matter needs to be considered at length. Our world seems to be undergoing rapid changes that are unknown to others. But after all, there is too little information, so it's not appropriate for us to act rashly at the moment." "We don't have time," Farrell said with a straight face. "If we delay by a day, they will swallow even more things. Our concession is giving them space to grow. I've looked for Roland, but he's dead. I've gone to the territories of the 13 clans, but those Grand Dukes are all dead. The clans are in chaos, and I can't find Balegang. Along the way, I haven't even seen a single living war hero." The master of the Radiance Tower did not speak. He knew that Farrell had not finished speaking. They are old and have long lost their fighting spirit. It's even possible that their bodily functions have regressed, and their strength has declined. Farrell shook his head. "Master Radiance, we need a new generation with even more potential. It's good to see you." "Master Radiance, with the power of your Magician Association, you can already select a new generation with great talent and great potential in the shortest time possible. They will be our hope against them." The master of the Radiance Tower frowned even more deeply. Farrell actually had such an idea. It was really beyond his expectations. "Nurture? A new generation?" "That's right." Farrell's gaze was fanatical. "The younger generation is filled with endless possibilities. However, we have experienced too much. Often, we choose to give in for the sake of making a choice. Our hot-bloodedness has long faded. Success and failure, gains and losses, the distribution of benefits, and the worldly fame and fortune have long corrupted the will of the previous generation. Among us, it's very difficult to find a hero who is willing to give up everything. However, the new generation can, because they still have dreams. Farrell, do you know that those old fellows whose will has been eroded by the passage of time, who can calculate success and failure, naturally include me?" The master of the Radiance Tower said expressionlessly, "You're different." Farrell took a deep breath and said, "You're different. I can feel that you're different now. Master Radiance, you've already taken the last step and only stopped. However, you can complete this step at any time. Furthermore what?" Farrell looked at the still Angel Hammereth and said crazily, "Furthermore, even if they can break through the void, they might not necessarily be stronger than us. Don't you feel that these angels? They have immense power. No, I'm more willing to call it energy. Looking at the situation of these two angels, they only have immense power. They're just machines with immense power, and the ones operating these machines are merely ordinary people. They simply don't know what the essence of power is. The kingdom of heaven isn't as simple as you think. The master of the Radiance Tower shook his head. Although the angels in front of you are indeed, as you said, they don't know the essence of power. You might not know that the birth of angels is different from the powerful life forms that break through the limits of the world. They're only life forms created in the void. They're inhabitants who are naturally able to adapt to the void. Farrell, even if the angels here can't stop you, the angels of the kingdom of heaven can. They can even drown you. This is because you simply don't know how many of these angels that you speak of have immense power but don't know how to use it. Farrell looked at the master of the Radiance Tower doubtfully. The master of the Radiance Tower said indifferently, "Due to some special reasons, I've learned about the matters outside the void in advance. The world outside is just like the starry sky you see. It's as huge as countless stars and has no boundaries. Actually, you don't have to insist on going against them." "What do you mean?" Farrell suddenly frowned. The master of the Radiance Tower sighed. Its main body was still digesting the terrifying information in the Mystic Tower. However, as time passed, the information digested by the main body was also reflected on the projection. The more it digested, the more insignificant it felt. "Nothing." The master of the Radiance Tower said slowly, "I just want to remind you, have you ever thought that there might be one of the more powerful members of the void? And in the void that has infinite possibilities, there might be something even more powerful than them." Grandmaster Radiance? Farrell was subconsciously shocked. "Don't tell me you," the master of the Radiance Tower sighed and said, "Perhaps it's time for me to take a look at the outside world. Magicians have always been searching for the ultimate path of magic. Now, I've been guarding the magicians here for too long. As for them, if they're always under my protection, they will never be able to grow." Farrell said angrily, "They might devour everything." "Everything." The master of the Radiance Tower was silent for a moment before slowly saying, "Have you never thought that they might not devour everything, but only harvest every once in a while?" "Harvest? There are too many secrets hidden in the void," the master of the Radiance Tower said calmly. "Now, I've only seen a drop in the ocean, but I can already feel its infinity. I can vaguely feel that the world hasn't reached its end. On the contrary, it's glowing with new vitality. Mysteries and transcendence are beginning to recover. Farrell, you can also take that step. Don't let the past interfere with your steps. If you really want to go against them, why do you need to put the cart before the horse and nurture a new generation? The new generation's obsession with them is unlike yours. The new generation doesn't even know what they are. But only you have that kind of obsession. Go out and take a look. Perhaps you can find the power to go against them outside. Go out and take a look. Go out and take a look. Search for power outside. Farrell's eyes became sharper. "Outside. That's all I have to say," the master of the Radiance Tower said calmly. "If you've thought it through, you can come and find me. I've already seen the path." Farrell sank into deep thought and remained motionless. The master of the Radiance Tower waved his hand and activated the teleportation function in the inhuman domain. He directly teleported the Mad Knight to a place outside the Holy Church's territory. Then, the master of the Radiance Tower looked at the miserable people from the Holy Church. Angel Himeric's expression didn't change much from the beginning until now. It was constantly fluctuating. As for the other angel, which was also the last descending angel, he was busy gathering the holy knights who had broken down mentally. He was trying to use the gospel of the kingdom of heaven to pacify the souls of these holy knights. The master of the Radiance Tower muttered to himself. Then he tapped his magic wand lightly. A mysterious halo appeared under his feet and spread out in an instant. To pacify the souls of these holy knights and even restore them to their original state. Even a master of the Radiance Tower couldn't do it through normal means, unless he had a strong soul power. But he could use a trick to do it in another way, which was to erase these holy knights' memories of meeting Farrell and erase this incident that caused them to break down. Bringing the vampire girl with him, the master of the Radiance Tower's projection once again activated the teleportation portal back to the headquarters of the Holy Church. The master of the Radiance Tower didn't even say a word and disappeared from the Holy Church's sight with Elizabeth. As soon as he left, a surge of holy power surged out from Angel Himeric's body like the raging waves of the deep sea. This huge and terrifying power instantly caused the surrounding space to surge. The air seemed to freeze in an instant, and then cracks began to appear. This expanding power had already caused some cracks to appear in the spatial structure of the inhuman domain. There was a loud sound in the sky, and a terrifying thunderbolt struck down from the Ching Tian. It directly struck Angel Himeric's body and split apart his terrifying holy power. This angel even felt the aura of death. Only the master of the Radiance Tower's voice echoed. Angels from a void, please remember that this is the inhuman domain. Angel Himeric's eyes were dazed at this moment. He stared blankly at the blue sky above his head and said involuntarily, "Law," in the main hall of the first master of the Mystic Tower that the vampire girl was familiar with. "Teacher, you said you want to leave. Are you going somewhere far away? Is it the modern world outside?" The girl's voice sounded in the main hall. The master of the Radiance Tower didn't answer this question. He just waved his hand, and a black magic book with golden edges suddenly flew out from the collection of 103,000 books. The master of the Radiance Tower held the magic book in his hand and seemed to be immersed in his memories. After a long time, I accidentally obtained this magic book when I was young. It's the origin of my magic path in this life. Later, I added what I learned in this life. I named it Ouroboros's handwritten book, and now it's yours. Thus, under the vampire girl's perplexed gaze, the grimoire slowly flew into her hands. The master of the Radiance Tower closed his eyes as if he was sleeping. Chapter 16:18. Quick, the old man is here. 3 figures quickly approached. They were Spirit Witch Jillian, Black Dragon Ajuin, and Sword Saint Roland's granddaughter, Leia. Farrell was extremely fast. By the time the Spirit Witches arrived, Farrell had already suppressed the Angel Himeril to the ground. They had also witnessed how Farrell stared at the members of the Holy Church until they broke down. Naturally, the witch hugged Leia and trembled. As for the Black Dragon, he was much quieter than the 2 girls. It was only when the Tower of Radiance's master arrived and sent Farrell away that they found a chance to quietly leave the Holy Church's territory. The Black Dragon tracked Farrell's aura and found where he was. This was a place outside the Holy Church. When they found Farrell, he was sitting cross-legged on a large rock with his eyes closed. It was as if he had completely fused with the rock. "Why does he look a little abnormal?" Leia asked subconsciously. "This old man has never been normal. Okay." The witch rolled her eyes. But when she thought of how Farrell, whom she had always referred to as an old man, had even slain a descending angel, she could not help but feel her hair stand on end. Shouldn't I be a little nicer to this old man? Just as the witch was vexed over how to wake up the motionless Farrell, the Black Dragon beside her suddenly handed her a tree branch. "Use this branch to poke at him." Mr. Black Dragon's eyes conveyed such a message. Then, Ms. Witch directly took the branch and sneered. With a crack, the branch was broken by Ms. Witch with her knee. "Go if you want to." The Black Dragon blinked. Then, as if he had forgotten about this matter, he turned to look at the bewildered Leia. Suddenly, Ajuin grabbed Leia's arm. Then, the Black Dragon revealed his true form and charged into the sky with Leia in his claws. If he did not leave now, when would he? However, before the Black Dragon could soar high into the sky, it was pulled back by an invisible force and slammed into the ground, seeing stars. It was unknown when Farlier had opened his eyes. He was muttering to himself, "Master Hui Yao's path is not suitable for me. Once I leave this place, I'll be escaping. Even if I use the excuse of going out to find a way to fight back, it won't make up for the fear in my heart. Only here, facing them head-on, can I find myself again." His gaze was sometimes clear and sometimes cloudy. It alternated back and forth before finally returning to normal. Farrell looked at the Black Dragon, whose eyes were filled with anger as he struggled to get up. He said calmly, "You can leave if you want, but Roland's descendant must stay. From now on, I will do my best to teach her." When the plump Leia heard that, Her vision turned black, and she almost fainted on the ground. Just as Mr. Witch was feeling sad for the granddaughter of the Sword Saint, Farrell's gaze turned towards her. Mr. Witch shuddered at the sight of this. Unexpectedly, Farlier said, "From now on, I will fulfill my promise to you and help you find that thing." That thing, Akshay's record. What did you say? Mr. Witch could hardly believe what she had just heard. She was ecstatic. Really? That's right. Farrell nodded and said calmly, "But at the same time, you need to be with Leia and receive my training." When she recalled how Farrell would train for tens of thousands of times, the joy in the witch's heart was instantly extinguished. It was a good thing she didn't faint on the ground. After the ups and downs, she began to doubt her life. When the last unconscious holy knight gradually woke up, Angel Hamilel, who was in the monastery of the Holy Church, wore a cold expression. Before the Tower of Radiance's master left, he had erased the holy knight's memories of Farrell from his mind. However, the clergyman of the priest team did not, nor did the redcoat from the hub who had fainted due to overexertion. Left with no choice, Angel Hamilel could only grit his teeth and erase the memories of the clergymen who were still conscious. He barely managed to maintain the holy ritual of the descending angels. That's strange. Why don't I see His Highness Angel Dennis? The hub redcoat looked around the team and did not see Angel Dennis. He could not help but feel puzzled. Dennis has another mission. He won't be with us in this mission. The one who answered the hub redcoat was the last angel to descend besides Hamilel, Cain. I see. The hub redcoat nodded. Your Highness Angel Cain, now that all the members of the Holy Church have arrived and gathered, should we immediately activate the coordinates to Britain? Angel Cain subconsciously looked in the direction of Angel Hamilel. Ever since he used the divine spell, this capable general of the Heavenly Kingdom's exploration army had not looked good. Let me ask Lord Hamilel first, Angel Cain said calmly. However, only it knew how much helplessness and fear it had in its heart at this moment. Soon, Angel Cain came to Angel Hamilel's side. He opened a barrier to block the transmission of sound, but he still asked in a low voice, Lord Hamilel, in such a short time, we have lost Dennis and the other two. The situation is serious. Should we? Hamilel suddenly waved his hand and interrupted Angel Cain. Ever since the Transcendent Organization invaded the Heavenly Kingdom, the number of angels in the Heavenly Kingdom has been tight. Otherwise, Lord Michael would not have stopped the exploration plan and returned to the Heavenly Kingdom to take charge. Lord Michael needs to deal with the Transcendent Organization's conspiracy. We should not cause trouble for Lord Michael now. But you don't have to say any more. Angel Hamilel said in a low voice. This time, we have already attracted the attention of the will of the child world. If we descend too many times in such a short time, it will easily cause the will of the child world to retaliate. Besides, we have just descended and have not completely fused with the host body. This time, it is not a crime of war. Once the two of us have completely fused with the host body and obtained all the holy relics of the Holy Church, there will be no ultimate champions in this child world that can threaten us. Holy Light, next time, we will thoroughly judge the heretic Farlier. Angel Cain subconsciously opened his mouth, but under Angel Hamilel's gaze, he gradually became obedient. Be it in terms of rank or power, he could not disobey Angel Hamilel's orders. However, even if he had completely fused with the host body and obtained the holy relics, would he really be able to fight against Farlier? Angel Cain vaguely doubted this, but he could only bury this doubt in his heart and lead the paladins and clergymen of the Holy Church. Angel Hamilel looked at Angel Cain's departing figure and could not help but frown. He muttered to himself in a low voice, It's not that we have never encountered an ultimate champion in our previous explorations, but none of them are as abnormal as the Mad Knight. And that Radiance Tower Master as well. What secret does Child World 003 have that it can produce so many native champions? Soon after, everyone gathered, and the coordinates to Britain were officially opened. Angel Hamilel could not help but rub his eyebrows as he watched the figures walking into the coordinates and arriving in Britain one by one. Every angel was a child of the Lord, and they were blessed by the Lord. They could not be so unlucky as to keep running into those terrifyingly powerful native champions, right? Don't scare yourself. Because of Boss Luo's promise, Lamia stayed in the manor for a while and then rode her beloved motorcycle that would not get stuck in traffic, the black motorcycle, and traveled on the road of the town. Since there was a guarantee that nothing would happen as long as she was in the town, Lamia's naturally had to make good use of this time to do something. She had already broken ties with the Black Order, so when the Dean of Discipline woke up and called her nonstop, Lamia's did not answer his call. Lamia's circled around the town, but still did not find any news of Sister Grant. As for the 6 missing combat nuns, she did not see them either. In the end, Lamia's came to Father Stella's church. At this time, Father Stella was holding a broom and standing in the courtyard of the church, sweeping the fallen leaves. She did not know that the church had been razed to the ground long ago, and there was a big hole in the ground, because when she arrived, the church was still the same church. Not only was the hole filled, but the church was also rebuilt overnight, as if nothing had happened. No one knew what had happened. Wasco left with the 4 paladin trainees, so he did not know what had happened. Lamia's hid in the armory all night, trying to fuse the holy relic of reversal and the 6 sets of inverse cross of fear armor, so she did not know what had happened. Even Mayor Lotta did not know what had happened. No one knew that the church had been restored to its original state from destruction. Lamia's saw Father Stella. After hesitating for a moment, she finally braced herself and walked over. At this time, as she approached, she looked at the white cross on the roof of the church with some self-mockery. How dazzling! Of course, the white cross that reflected the sunlight, as if it had been added with the special effect of the holy light, almost blinding Lamia's eyes. At this time, she heard some strange sounds. It seemed to be the sound of metal clashing. Lamia's subconsciously looked and found that there was not only Father Stella in the courtyard, but also a bald man. The sound came from the feet of the bald man. What made Lamia's unable to look straight was that the bald man's feet were shackled and tied with a big iron ball. Not only that, his hands were also tied with chains. Even his face was covered with an iron mask. This reminded Lamia's of a certain medieval punishment. How could a priest do such a thing? But it seemed that Father Stella's predecessor was a warden, and it was the godly might prison of the Holy Church that imprisoned extremely vicious dark creatures and heretics. This guy stole the money from the church's donation box last night. This lost child is now repenting. Don't plead for him. It will make him feel even more guilty and uncomfortable. Father Stella glared at this time and said seriously. Mayarada looked at the sky hopelessly. He felt that he had not only lost his freedom, but also his dignity, and even his soul. Shame. A lifetime of shame. His heart was like dead ashes, but that was it. Who wants to plead for this guy that I don't even know? Lamia's lips moved. Finally, she shook her head. She did not know this bald man at all, so whether he lived or died had nothing to do with her. But Father Stella, instead of saying that this priest was crazy, it was better to say that he was a bad old man who knew how to not play by the rules. But Lamia's already had a plan in mind. With the guarantee of the mysterious manor owner, Lamia's did feel more at ease, but she needed more safety protection. No one would complain that they had too little protection. Father, I have come to listen to your teachings. Lamia's said with a smile. I have already said last night, from now on, you are my faith. I will give my body and heart to you. Father Stella took 2 cold breaths on the spot and scolded. You actually wanted to stir my purity and break my virginity? How can you be so vicious? The scared priest, at this time, directly raised the broom in his hand and pointed at Lamia's as if he was facing a great enemy. I will fight with you. Be careful, or I will smack you to death with the broom. You coquettish bitch. Oh, Father, last night you clearly wanted to be surrounded by shy nuns. Lamia smiled until her eyes curved. Father, don't you know that the nuns of the Black Order have a special service technique? This technique, as a traitor of the Order, I have seriously learned it before. Father Stella was stunned for a moment, as if he was having an indescribable battle in his heart. Well, actually, I'm also very happy to guide the confused passersby. At this time, the priest straightened his chest. You see, my faith is so firm. Follow me, and you will definitely have a bright future. A ray of holy light suddenly fell. At the same time, the space where the church was located seemed to be confined by something, but it was not the curtain of darkness that could produce a fallen force field like the holy relic, but a kind of holy barrier. When the holy church was fighting with the dark creatures in the downtown area, they would usually cast a holy barrier that shielded them. A large number of clergymen cast it together. In other words, the people of the holy church had appeared at this time. Sinner Stella, accept your judgment. A solemn voice appeared in the sky above the church. At the same time, the figures of holy knights poured out from the surroundings of the church. A red coat, surrounded by a group of holy knights, walked over. Looking at such a formation, Lamia's suddenly looked like her mouth was stuffed with a few pounds of octopus claws. Well, didn't you just say that you want to follow me? Good. Now go and beat these guys for me. Just when Lamia's was shocked, Father Stella whispered something beside her, and then pushed her back fiercely, forcing her to run forward. At the same time, this woman is a combat nun of the Black Order. Purify her quickly. Father Stella's loud, friendly reminder. Chapter 16:19. The moment she was pushed out, Lamia's felt that even when the god-slaying armor was crushed by Father Stella, she had never felt so terrified before. There were at least 20 holy knights, and even more clergymen from the priest squad. There was even a core red coat. With such a battle formation, it was enough to fight a great battle with the Black Order. At this time, the eyes of these big shots from the Holy Church were all focused on Lamia's. Even if she was wearing the god-slaying armor, her heart would still beat faster, not to mention that she was not wearing it at this time. Only the reverse cross of fear was still hanging on the back of the motorcycle. As for the motorcycle, it was now outside the circle of holy knights from the Holy Church. Ruthless, a battle nun from the Black Order. The core redcoat suddenly frowned and looked at Lamia's subconsciously, as if thinking about something, but this core redcoat quickly shook his head and did not care too much. What a joke! The Black Order's forces in Europe were wiped out by a few descended angels almost overnight. At this time, there were two more descended angels, and one of them was the most powerful descended angel, Lord Hamaliel. Not to mention a battle nun. Even if the chief of the Black Order was here, the core redcoat felt that he was not afraid at all. Since we have met, let's capture her while we are at it, the core redcoat said calmly. As soon as he finished speaking, the two holy knights suddenly moved and captured Lamia's easily before she could react as a normal person. Lamia's did not even have the slightest ability to resist. Not only did she not resist, this lady who used to be a battle nun even had a look of doubt in her eyes at this time. Forget about the promise. As long as I stay in this town, I'll be fine. Where is she? How did she get caught? When she was directly pushed back by the two holy knights, Lamia's suddenly shuddered. After struggling in vain for a while, her face darkened. She felt that she might have been deceived by the mysterious manor owner. However, looking at the group of ferocious holy knights and the large number of priests, Lamia's felt that it was only natural. In the face of the Holy Church's terrifying lineup, even Father Stella immediately became terrified and pushed him out. Ignoring the pain in the nun's heart, the redcoat of the Holy Church spoke again. Stella, the Holy Church tolerated you opening a church here, but I didn't expect you to harbor heretics from the Black Order here. It seems that you have really fallen. Who do you think you are? How dare you talk to me like that? Father Stella said coldly, believe it or not, I will write a letter to the Pope to impeach you. Me and you and the Pope are good friends. We've been shot together, we've squatted by windows together, and we've even received sexual enlightenment together. Don't you think so? The redcoat of the hub opened his mouth and only shook his head with a dark expression after a while. Naturally, he did not know Father Stella. At most, they were friends according to the records in the archives. For the warden who had left the Godly Might prison for decades, the young redcoat of the hub did not have a good impression of him at all. The Pope was really too indecisive. He could actually tolerate Stella, a guy who was almost like a traitor, to spend his days leisurely in the land of Britain. The Pope was indeed old, and did not have the courage of his youth. This time, following the arrival of the fallen angel, after returning to the Holy Church, his reputation should be improved a lot, right? Rumor has it that you, Stella, have a bad character and no one can compare to you. It seems that it is true. The red coat of the hub flicked his fingernails. I don't want to talk nonsense with you, and I can't compare to your classmate, Wasco. Today, you will follow me back to the holy city to be judged. Speaking of Wasco, the red coat of the hub suddenly had some doubts. Paladin Wasco was obviously not here. If he was not here, then so be it. This time, the Holy Church directly activated the coordinates, and with the special characteristics of the inhuman domain, they crossed the continent and came here in a short time. It consumed a lot of resources, so it was imperative to capture Stella alive. As for Wasco's absence at this time, it did not affect the operation at this time. Soon, Angel Hamaliel and Angel Quinn were now supervising. As a strong candidate for the Pope, how could he make a mistake in this operation? The red coat of the hub waved his hand, and 4 paladins immediately moved at this moment and surrounded Father Stella. The 4 paladins, fully armed and alert, had a threatening aura. Warden Stella, sorry to offend you, one of the paladins said with a serious expression. The instructor once said that if you become a paladin, you will definitely be the first among the paladins. So we have to give it our all. Father Stella lowered his head and said nothing. Outside the church, Angel Hamaliel and Angel Quinn stood with their hands behind their backs, and their gazes fell on the church's courtyard. Angel Hamaliel suddenly said, before Jennifer died, she sent a message that this Stella is suspected to be a blasphemer and has also raised a void original demon. Later, when the void original demon appears, you suppress Stella and leave the void original demon to me. Quinn nodded with a serious expression on his face. Two-winged. As a two-winged angel, when facing the void original demon, there was a huge flaw. Even those with powerful combat strength like Fayers and Jennifer, who could compare to a 4-winged angel of the 3rd level, did not dare to recklessly touch the void original demon. Only by advancing to 4-winged. Only when a true 4-winged angel faced the void original demon would they be able to resist the corrosive effect of the void original demon, which was like poison to angels. Compared to the void original demon, Stella, as a blasphemer, was much less dangerous. The damage blasphemers caused to the kingdom of heaven was in the destruction of faith, and not every blasphemer had the ability to cause harm to the kingdom of heaven. Blasphemers could be immune to the holy power of pestilence, but blasphemers could not resist the most direct physical damage. At this thought, Angel Quinn waved his hand, and a silver spear appeared. Since he wanted to deal with a blasphemer, he naturally could not use a weapon condensed from holy light. Holding the spear, Angel Quinn was like a taut spring, ready to explode with terrifying power at any time. Father Stella lowered his head and did not speak. The 4 holy knights looked at each other. Finally, one of the holy knights behind Father Stella walked out and placed his hand firmly on Father Stella's shoulder, wanting to push him down. Wait! Father Stella suddenly raised his head just as the holy knight was about to exert his strength, his expression grave. Perhaps they were too nervous, but the moment Father Stella raised his head, they all flashed their weapons. As for the holy knight who had placed his hand on Father Stella's shoulder, he took a step back and instinctively bent his upper body slightly, placing his hand on his sword. Swords and bows were drawn. I forgot to dry the clothes. Father Stella patted his head and quickly said, just stand here, wait for me to dry the clothes, then we'll continue to bicker. Don't go away. You've offended me. You can't run away. You. The holy knight behind Father Stella glared at him. He was actually frightened by the other party's action of raising his head. If this would have spread, he would be the laughing stock of his career. Infuriated, the holy knight immediately attacked. You want to leave? Not so easy. The holy knight directly swung his sword, and Father Stella's figure was instantly torn into 2 by this slash. An afterimage? A terrifying sense of danger came from behind the holy knight who attacked. He did not care about his instinctive fear and instantly turned around. only to be met with a rolling pin. Bang! He only felt that the rolling pin's strength was like a speeding truck. The Holy Knight's standard armor of glory was actually hit by this rolling pin, leaving a concave surface. One hit, and he fell to the ground. Everyone was shocked, but then they saw Father Stella directly jumped onto the roof of the church. No one knew where he got a big bag of flour from, and at this moment, he sprinkled it in front of them. The snow-white flour immediately stained everyone's body, making the members of the church look quite embarrassed. Couldn't they avoid this flour? Of course they could. The problem was this thing that could be avoided was actually sprinkled on them at this moment. That was fine. The problem was that Father Stella, the former warden of the Godly Might prison, the priest who single-handedly created many legends of the Holy Church decades ago, knew this trick of sprinkling flour? Trash. Dozens of you are allowed to block me, but I'm not allowed to sprinkle flour? Father Stella now raised his nose and looked at the embarrassed people below with care. Didn't your mother teach you how to fight on the streets? No need to talk nonsense with him anymore. Capture him alive with violence. The hub redcoat had always cherished his image. He really cared about his image. 9 out of 10 of the upper echelons of the Holy Church, even the Pope, were balding. Only he still had a head of thick hair, and he was the most handsome person in the upper echelons of the church. How could he ruin his image in such a place? Angry. Dash! A rolling pin hit the hub redcoat's face head-on, directly breaking a few of his teeth. Damn it! Father Stella spat at this moment. I've long told the Pope, this old bastard, not to promote the guy with the middle parting, but he just didn't listen. I hate the guy with the middle parting the most in my life. I'm so angry. Protect His Highness in the red coat. Everyone was shocked, and the Holy Knights instantly swarmed up. In the small church courtyard, dozens of powerful holy power burst out in a split second. But at the same time, screams rang out one after another. Priest Strahl used his rolling pin to hit the paladins one by one. Every hit was accurate, and the paladins were unable to fight back. In front of Father Stella, the Holy Knights who had graduated from the training camp seemed to have returned to the days when they were in the training camp. It was as if they had returned to the time before they came in contact with power, when they were just outstanding young people. How was he so strong? The grenade of holy light didn't work at all. This is the horror of the Godly Might prison Iron Fist? Oh my God! Seeing the Holy Knights being hit until they saw stars and fell to the ground one by one, Lamia's couldn't help but widen her eyes. Since when were the Holy Knights so weak? But facing such a powerful Father Stella, maybe she could take advantage of the chaos and escape, as expected of a blasphemer. In the distance, Angel Homeric frowned and then snorted coldly. Quinn, I'll leave this blasphemer to you. It seems that the Holy Church of this subworld is really incompetent. The standard of this batch of Holy Knights can't even be considered average among the Holy Church of so many subworlds. After all, the Kingdom of Heaven rarely manages subworlds. Angel Quinn shook his head. In the records of the Holy Church of Subworld 003, the last time an angel descended was hundreds of years ago. This was not like some of the subworlds that were heavily managed, where it was common for angels to descend. Shaking his head, Angel Quinn spread the wings of light behind him, and his body suddenly floated up. The next moment, Angel Quinn soared into the sky, as it should. At this moment, Angel Quinn felt a huge force pulling at his leg and fiercely pulling him back to the ground. It looked at its legs in shock, only to discover that several shadows had unknowingly wrapped around its legs. The rope-like shadows were now coiling toward its upper body. Alarmed, Angel Quinn unleashed his holy power. However, the moment his holy power erupted, it was sucked away by the shadows like a deflated balloon. Master Homeric, save me. Angel Quinn instantly rushed out of the carrier of his descent, and a light ball containing his origin shot out from the chest of the carrier and shot toward Angel Homeric. But in the next moment, this source was directly swallowed up by a dark shadow that emerged from the ground. Homeric was shocked and couldn't care less about what was happening in the courtyard of the church. This was because his legs were silently entangled by several shadows. His power was draining rapidly. How come there are only 2 angels? Didn't you say that there should be 3 more angels? A man wearing a black suit and a top hat walked over slowly with a black cat in his arms. The shadows that had swallowed Angel Quinn and entangled Angel Homeric came from the shadow of this man. You're the one who killed Fayers and severely injured Jennifer. Homeric was shocked, angry, and terrified. Jennifer? The man in the suit paused for a moment and said, "That's the name of the angel who went back to deliver the message. But her name has nothing to do with me. You, on the other hand, are much more powerful than them. Unfortunately, even with you guys, it's still not enough. Laws. It's the power of laws again." Hammereth sensed the terrifying aura coming from the shadow. As an angel, the light in his heart seemed to have been instantly extinguished. Despair almost caused him to collapse. Even his origin was flowing away at a crazy speed. What's wrong with this world? Why is it so dangerous? I won't die here. Hammereth let out a furious roar. He decisively gave up on the host of his descent and shot the origin sphere toward the courtyard of the church. He planned to attach himself to a member of the Holy Church temporarily. Even if he couldn't use 1/10 of his power, it would be better than being swallowed by the shadow. Shaking his head, the man in the suit lowered his head with a smile and patted the head of the black cat in his arms. The black cat meowed intimately and jumped out of the man's arms, chasing after the light ball of origin of Homeric. At this time, Father Strahl, who had pulled the 7 holy knights to the side and was knocking their heads like hamsters, felt something and waved the rolling pin in his hand. But the rolling pin seemed to hit nothing. It seemed like it hit something, but it also seemed like it didn't hit anything. Father Stella frowned and ignored it. He continued to wave the rolling pin that brought fear and domination at the holy knights. "Who told you to blabber in front of me? I hate it when people blabber in a fight." Tom Cruise, who was hiding in the corner of the courtyard and sleeping lazily, suddenly opened his eyes. A trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. He felt like something delicious was flying toward him. Thus, Tom Cruise opened his mouth, and something flew into his mouth. It was really something delicious. Tom Cruise burped. Then, a black cat appeared in front of Tom Cruise. It stood on its 2 legs, opened its mouth, and stared at Tom Cruise. Isn't this angel's death really unjust? The black cat was speaking human language. Chapter 16:20. Its front limbs drooped down naturally while its back limbs were upright. The black cat stood like a human and spoke human language. If an ordinary person was here, they would probably think that it had become a demon. But Tom Cruise was obviously not an ordinary person. It was just a golden form, or a void original demon disguised as a golden form. Meow. Tom Cruise slowly got up and walked towards the black cat. The black cat didn't move and looked at Tom Cruise's actions with interest. When Tom Cruise finally came in front of the black cat, it stretched out its nose to smell the black cat. After circling back and forth a few times, Tom Cruise squatted in front of the black cat and tilted its head, seemingly at a loss. "What do you want to do to me?" The black cat spoke human language again and stretched out its claws. Just at this moment, Tom Cruise suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a huge tentacle from his mouth. The black cat's pupils shrank. At the same time, a pair of small wings miraculously grew out from each of its hind legs. It rapidly knocked on the back of its head. The tentacle swept past and smashed onto the floor. As expected, it's you guys. A murderous look flashed across the black cat's eyes, but it quickly dimmed. But Tom Cruise clearly did not intend to stop there. In an instant, dozens of tentacles were spat out from his mouth. That ugly and violent scene instantly made the black cat's heart skip a beat. Some unpleasant memories were crazily rampaging in its little head. In the end, the result was that the black cat's eyes were suddenly dyed with a smear of blood red. A large amount of black gas was emitted from the black cat's body. Hermes. But at this moment, a white hand stretched out from behind and directly grabbed the black cat by the back of its neck and grabbed it. The blood-red color in the black cat's eyes gradually faded. It looked up at the man in the suit who grabbed its neck with some dissatisfaction. Then, Even the black gas on its body gradually dispersed. At the same time, the dozens of tentacles spat out from Tom Cruise's mouth attacked the man in the suit. The shadow under the man in formal attire suddenly opened up and turned into a wall of shadows, easily blocking Tom Cruise's tentacles. Not only that, the wall of shadows even rose from the ground and turned into four walls. Finally, the man in formal attire waved his hand, and the fifth wall of shadows came down from the sky, directly sealing Tom Cruise within. A cat that lost its freedom would obviously go crazy. Tom Cruise went crazy at this moment. The tentacles spat out from its mouth, flapped wildly, but didn't damage the shadow wall at all. Finally, Tom Cruise squatted on the ground and looked at all this with a blank face. It wasn't afraid. The man in the suit sighed. "You're obviously a little different to be able to survive here, but a primordial demon, after all, it can't be absorbed. How about making a deal? Spit out what you just swallowed, and I'll let you out." Tom Cruise didn't care at all. He directly opened his legs and began to bite his own shedding hair. The man in formal attire didn't get angry. Instead, he said indifferently, "As you wish, but you'd better be prepared to be imprisoned by me until the end of time. My power comes from the origin of death. As long as death exists, this box won't disappear. Of course, you won't die either, but you won't be able to eat delicious food in the future." Tom Cruise raised its head and looked at the other party pitifully. Finally, it bent its body, and after a few breaths, it reluctantly spat out the ball of light that it had just swallowed. The moment Tom Cruise spat out this ball of light, the shadow wall disappeared instantly, and the ball of light flew directly into the hands of the man in the suit. The man in the suit suddenly laughed. "Actually, I lied to you, but to imprison you until the end of time, I can't do it at all." Tom Cruise's eyes widened, and its hair stood on end. Then, it pounced madly at the man in the suit, but this time a wrinkled hand reached out from behind and grabbed Tom Cruise's neck directly. "Father Stella?" It was unknown when the priest came in. After grabbing Tom Cruise, he casually threw him out of the window and instructed, "Don't run out." Tom Cruise didn't come in again. Father Stella frowned and looked at the man in the suit. He suddenly asked curiously, "Why are you dressed like this today? Are you going to attend a party? Why didn't you call me?" "I'm not him." The man in the suit smiled. Then, his figure gradually faded. "But I might come to you again, Father." "What?" Father Stella was stunned. Then, he shot out like lightning. But in the end, he only caught a wisp of air. Father Stella's eyes flashed with a trace of fierceness, and he rushed out. He came to the courtyard and saw the holy knights, the clergy, and even the redcoat from the hub. They were all lying on the ground, motionless. Father Stella looked at the people on the ground in silence. Among them, only Lamia's seemed to have received a huge shock. She sat on the ground, paralyzed, her eyes lifeless. At least she didn't fall on the ground. It was just that her body was trembling and her lips were trembling. She wanted to say something, but she couldn't make a sound. No, other than Lamia's, there was another person in the courtyard who was conscious. It was Mayor Lotta, who was shackled by Father Stella. Mayor Lotta's eyes were blooming with fanaticism. He directly knelt on the ground like some kind of ceremony. Padash, looking at the corpses of the holy church people all over the ground, Father Stella suddenly hit his head hard. "Damn it, my clothes haven't been dried yet." The priest rushed into the church and didn't care about the mess in the courtyard. Lamia shuddered violently at this moment. She crawled and ran to the front of the motorcycle parked outside the church. She turned on the accelerator and rushed out madly. Fortunately, the church was built at the edge of the town, and there weren't many residents nearby. It was noon. The residents in the few houses nearby had gone out to work, so the roar of the motorcycle didn't disturb the residents. But Lamia's was about to lose her life, so she didn't care about that. Just as she rushed out of the church's courtyard, Tom Cruise came out of nowhere. Looking at the corpses all over the ground, Tom Cruise slowly opened his mouth. Under the sun, a cluster of shadows like the claws of an octopus was dancing. She was almost in a panic, running in a straight direction, wanting to leave the town. As expected, it was still too difficult for a mortal to contend with supernatural powers. If those fellows, those fellows with terrifying powers were as rational as the manor master. Perhaps they would be able to talk to her properly. The surrounding scenery flashed past Lamia's eyes crazily. At this moment, a thought suddenly appeared in her mind. Most of the techniques mastered by the black congregations were techniques, and there were not many people in the church who had inhuman powers. Even among these inhuman powers, most of the mysterious powers were of the auxiliary type. A powerful crystal like the Godslayer armor was easily destroyed by Father Stella. Faced with such terrifying individual power, what kind of confidence did the Black Order have to think that they could go against the Holy Church, with the plan that they had been preparing for 100 years? Lamias didn't know. In fact, before she rushed into town to escape from Pride's call, Lamias was quite confident that the Black Order would definitely be able to deal a heavy blow to the Holy Church. The advanced technology within the Order, combined with supernatural power, gave the people of the Order an unparalleled confidence. Even the Holy Relic, which the Black Order had successfully snatched from the Holy Church. Father Stella alone was not something that the Black Order could resist at this time. But even so, it was not as terrifying as what she had experienced at the end of the day in the church. So many holy knights, clergy, and even a core redcoat had silently fallen in front of her. She didn't know whether these people were dead or not, but the scene was so strange that it even triggered the self-protection mechanism of the human brain. People said that once the pain exceeded the limit of endurance, the brain would put the person into a coma in order to protect the human body and avoid the torture of pain. It was the same with fear. Escape became the only thought in Lamias's mind at this time. The speeding motorcycle had traveled a long distance, perhaps completely out of the town. Lamias didn't feel relaxed at all. Instead, she became more and more panicked. There was only one thought in her mind at this time. It was not enough. She had to go further, even further, until a figure blocked the road in front of her. She started the motorcycle in a hurry and didn't even have time to put on her helmet. The roaring wind made it difficult for her to open her eyes. She vaguely saw the figure in front of her, but it was too late to dodge. The motorcycle crashed into it. Bang! With a loud bang, Lamias's body was thrown directly by inertia and slammed into the trunk of a tree on the side of the road. She only felt that her internal organs were overturned, and there was a bloody taste in her throat. Lamias endured the pain and struggled to get up. In the middle of the road, Eve was holding the front of the motorcycle with one hand. This motorcycle had been completely compressed at this time, as if it had crashed into a steel plate half a meter behind. "It's you?" Lamias was shocked and angry at this time. At this time, Eve casually threw the motorcycle that had been compressed into a pile of scrap metal. The scrap metal motorcycle fell directly on top of Lamias's head and smashed directly into the soil. Miss Lamias. At this time, Eve was walking slowly, but she walked into the mud beside the road, because the mud would stain her shoes. "According to the agreement between you and Master, your safety zone is within this small town," Eve said slowly. "If you walk out of the town's range, we will treat it as you voluntarily gave up your protection." Lamias was angry at the mention of her sore spot. She said frantically, "Protect? I was in the church just now, and I almost died. Why didn't your people do anything?" She was angry, so angry. Why did Eve come out without a reason? "Aren't you still alive now?" Eve said indifferently. Lamias said with hatred, "I was caught by the paladins, if it wasn't for—" "Wait, those paladins and preachers, were you the one who killed them?" "No." Eve shook her head. "But you were caught by the paladins, but it doesn't mean that your life is in danger. As long as you are still in this small town, as long as the protection period is still in effect, and as long as your life is not directly in danger, it is not considered a violation of the agreement." Lamias felt as if she had swallowed a dozen pounds of octopus claws. According to what is said, even if she was caught and tortured in the small town, as long as she did not die and did not leave the town's range, it was not a problem. Devil! She screamed in her heart, but she could not change the fact. Lamias immediately lowered her head and said nothing. Eve waited quietly. Lamias suddenly looked up and said, "As long as I'm still in the town and under the protection period, I will never die." Eve said, Master said that you will not die. Naturally you will not die, but that is limited by external forces. Miss Lamia's, suicide is not within the scope of our service. We have no problem with protecting you, but if you want to kill yourself, that is your business. We can't stop you from killing yourself, can we? Everything is up to your own wishes. Lamia's expression changed slightly. She did have some strange thoughts in her mind, but Eve's answer instantly destroyed the bold idea that suddenly appeared in her mind. Don't worry, I still want to see the sun every day in the future. Lamia's silently tidied her clothes, and at the same time, she corrected her broken arm when she fell down. Was it painful? Of course it was painful, but it was bearable. It was not as desperate as the feeling of fate being played in the hands of other people. Miss Lamia's, do you plan to go back to the manor? Eve said at this time. If so, I can accompany you back. Of course, you can also choose to stay in a small town, but I will not accompany you. No. Lamia's forced a smile. I have my own house, and I don't need to live in another man's house. Do as you wish. Eve bowed and then lightly jumped, disappearing into the forest beside the road. It was a private apartment allocated to Lamia's in the university. No doubt, after her betrayal, all the things related to the Black Order had been destroyed. The person who did it was probably the discipline master who lurked in the university. In fact, there was nothing particularly useful in this place. At most, there were some materials for the laptop. Lamia's dragged her extremely tired body into the bathroom. Half an hour later, she casually walked out with a bath towel wrapped around her body. Don't move. Behind her, a figure came out, and at the same time, pointed a gun at her back. The voice came from the discipline master. You're just an ordinary employee. Lamia's was not frightened, and said indifferently, How confident do you think you can hurt me with this weapon? Silence. At this time, Lamia's slowly turned around. Under the complicated gaze of the discipline master, she reached out and held the muzzle of the discipline master's gun. The discipline master's face suddenly turned pale. You don't plan to shoot me? What do you want to do? Why did you betray the Cultivation Association? Do you know that now the headquarters has issued the order to kill you? Lamia's made a gesture of silence, then narrowed her eyes and said, Now, tell the Cultivation Association that I am here. With that, she pulled off the necklace on her body. I know, the Cultivation Association, especially the group of people of the new faction, must be very concerned about it. As long as you don't leave the town, you won't be killed. Then, come, those one deal with me. This is not beyond the scope of the agreement, right? Chapter 16:21. Not enough. Not enough energy. I need more energy. How many times have I told you? This is a process that abides by the law of conservation. If you can only provide this much, then what you'll get is trash that can't even be considered a defective product. Forget it. I'm not in the mood to waste time here today. Hurry up and prepare a few toys for me and send them to my room. Also, send me a female hound. I want a pure white one. His bloated body was like a worm as he slowly walked out of the lab. His name was Master Pride, and he was the only one in the world who could use the strange power of structural alchemy. He came from another world, but in essence, Master Pride was not much different from a human being. At least, in the modern world, he was not much different from a human being. At least, he could be injured. When the Black Order found Master Pride, he was already seriously injured. It was a dark and windy night, and the Black Order found Master Pride on a mountaintop. At that time, he fell like a meteorite, and the place where he fell even had a forest fire. But even under such a terrible impact, Master Pride did not die. The Black Order even saw with their own eyes that Master Pride gradually recovered from a pile of mud-like flesh and blood into a human being, even though his appearance was extremely ugly. Still not enough energy? In the lab, the core researchers of the Black Order couldn't help but shudder. Master Pride might not know where this place was, but they knew. This was a nuclear power plant of the most powerful country in the modern world. The Black Order had followed the wave of immigrants 100 years ago to this desolate continent. In just a short 100 years, they had even reached out to every field in this country. More than 50% of the people in this country were believers of the Holy Church, and the influence of the Holy Church here could even reach the level of the country. But the one who really influenced the major decisions of this country behind the scenes was the religious order. The Holy Church didn't even know that the country with so many believers was the Black Order's nest, because the Black Order had placed too many strongholds on Euroland. However, while there were many strongholds in Euroland, there weren't many elites of the Order. Thus, even if all the strongholds in Euroland were destroyed in a single night by the angels, the Black Monastery would only feel fear. In essence, they wouldn't be harmed. But after all, the angel had descended, and it was like the sword of Damocles hanging over their heads, constantly reminding the people of the religious order that if they didn't obtain enough power to resist, they would face another 100 years, or even hundreds of years of dormancy. The chief of the Black religious congregation was willing to satisfy all of Master Pride's unreasonable requests at all costs, just because this Master Pride was able to push the plan that the Black religious congregation had been preparing for 100 years straight to the point where it could finally bear fruit. If it wasn't for the sudden appearance of this Master Pride, the Black Order would still continue to be dormant, slowly accumulating strength and pushing forward the 100-year plan bit by bit. The chief of the Black Order knew that he was the type to fight steadily and steadily. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to develop the Black Order to the extent that it was today. But humans, once they saw a shortcut, they couldn't resist the convenience that it brought. It was said to be a 100-year plan, but according to the power that the Black Order held, this 100-year plan might be a 200-year plan or even a 250-year plan. Time was too long. The chief of the Black Order might not be able to see the day when the plan finally came to fruition. All of their efforts would turn into the sweetest fruit, waiting for the next chief to pluck it. Perhaps it would be the next chief, or perhaps it would be the next chief. That person would use the power of this fruit to fight back against the Holy Church and eventually succeed. Then he would become an unprecedented hero in the history of the Black Order, and the most glorious glory would be bestowed upon that person. The current chief wasn't willing to selflessly give away 100 years of hard work to his successor, even if he didn't know who would inherit his will in the future. It wasn't important. It didn't matter who it was in the future. What was important was that he had seen the hope of ending the 100-year plan in advance. Pride's structural alchemy. In a room that was surrounded by metal and exploded with a sense of technology, an old man sitting in a wheelchair couldn't help but narrow his eyes as he looked at the bloated and ugly back of Master Pride on the screen. The old man was abnormally skinny, but his brain seemed to be bigger than a normal person's. He was an old bald man. One could even see the distribution of blood vessels on his withered arms. One of the blood vessels was wrapped around a needle, and beside the wheelchair, there were a few bags of medicine used for infusion. Chief, this Pride's demands are getting more and more outrageous. This time, he actually wants to get the Dark Saintess. A young man said with a hint of anger beside the old man. Send it to him. The old man was silent for a moment, and then agreed expressionlessly. Chief. The young man was rather agitated. The old man said indifferently, the so-called Dark Saintess is just a product that was cultivated for 20 years. We still have a few girls with such a body. Send it to him and feed this fat pig. Chief, Pride's greed is a bottomless abyss. We can't keep satisfying his demands. I'm not dead yet. The chief suddenly glared at the young man. The young man's body was instantly thrown backwards and crashed heavily into the metal wall. His body didn't slide down, but was pressed against the wall by an invisible force. The young man felt as if all the blood in his body had stopped flowing, and the air around him seemed to have been sucked away. He was about to die. The terrifying force disappeared in an instant, and the young man fell to the ground. His face was pale as he struggled to get up and lowered his head. I'll go now. After the young man left, the old man showed a hint of pain. The blood vessels in his brain seemed to have a life of their own and were now pulsating rapidly. The pulsating blood vessels densely covered his scalp, as if there were hundreds of worms buried in his scalp, and it was rather frightening. After a while, the old man's abnormality gradually calmed down. He sighed weakly, and a hint of despair flashed through his eyes. He muttered to himself, "No matter how I strengthen, no matter how I modify, I still can't match this powerful spiritual force. Why? Why did they give me this peerless spiritual force, but not give me a body that can withstand it? As soon as he finished speaking, a mouthful of thick black blood was directly vomited from his body. The old man's face looked even weaker, like a flame that was about to be extinguished. Your body can't support it anymore. In the originally empty room, a low voice suddenly sounded. I've tried all the methods, and I can already foresee your imminent death. The old man didn't speak and just kept silent. After a while, he said weakly, previously, you told me that a new church appeared in the continent of South America. The Pope, called Buggy, can resurrect the dead. I've secretly sent out several groups of people, but they were all wiped out. This Buggy seems to be protected by a very powerful force, and there's no way to catch him in a short time. The old man was silent again, and then he said, the mysterious Eastern alchemy of the monks? Never step foot on the land of Kelowna. The low voice sounded again. You want the Shinryu of Kelowna to come here and destroy your territory? The old man slowly closed his eyes, as if he was recalling something. After a long time, he sighed and said, back then, if I was willing enough, the Radiants wouldn't have been able to suppress most of the opposition, and the coalition wouldn't have succeeded in the crusade. If they were still here. Maybe they are still here, but you can't find them. The voice sounded again. The old man shook his head, and his eyes were blurred. He looked at the screen, hundreds of screens that monitored almost all the places and important people of the Black Order. Could it be that the powerful force that God has given me is only for my body to not be able to withstand it, and in the end, I'll die without doing anything? Maybe there's another way. The voice sounded again. What way? The old man suddenly opened his eyes wide, as if he had grasped the last straw of hope. The powerful force that he called the psychic power filled the entire room at this time, and in an instant, all the instruments, decorations, and even the floor were shattered. I've received information that the traitorous Lamias have taken the initiative to contact us this time. The voice was not affected by the old man's psychic power at all, and there was no fluctuation in the voice at all. According to the last fragment transmitted by the Nautilus, we originally planned to capture Father Stella. His strength has even exceeded the level that we assessed. If it's pride, he probably has a way to help you use Stella as a material to refine a body that can match your psychic power. No matter how strong Stella is, he's still just a human. The old man instantly deflated like a balloon. I've tried all the methods to strengthen the body. My body was once strong enough to withstand the explosion of a missile, but it's still not enough. What if, on top of Stella's foundation, you can pierce through the body of the Duke? The voice at this time had a hint of madness. Even if you're crazy enough, you can also use the thing that you've been preparing for 100 years as a material. Hearing this, the old man's breathing suddenly quickened. The violent breathing caused his cerebral cortex to twitch violently again, and the blood vessels on his scalp surged wildly as if they would burst at any time. Can it really? Who knows? The voice gradually became fainter. This is just an idea. However, why should we let the level of knowledge limit our imagination? You have to know that everything that seems impossible and will not appear, but will eventually come true, its origin is the unlimited imagination of humans. Moreover, you really don't have much time left, especially with your outburst just now. It has probably greatly shortened your pitiful life. How much time do I have? The old man suddenly calmed down like a dried corpse. In hours. The voice slowly sounded. You shouldn't have done it yourself and reversed the holy relic in order to push forward the plan. This has reduced your life from at least half a year to what it is now. Your spiritual power is really the strongest kind of power among humans, but it's a pity that you don't have a body that can match it. God is really fair. As the chief of the Black Order, how could he believe in this set of words? The old man's face was terrifyingly silent. The terrible condition of his body was greatly beyond his expectations. He even suspected that the owner of the voice was lying to him. However, the old man could clearly feel the smell of death that was getting stronger and stronger. Even if it was not as bad as what the voice said, It would not be any better. Finally, after a long wait, the old man took a deep breath, as if he had given up, and said in despair, "Take plate, and take me, go to Britain. I wish you success, great chief." The voice gradually faded away, and the old man's cough began to sound again. "Great. I will become great. Britain, St. Andrew's Academy, the teacher's dormitory area." The discipline master stood behind Lamia's, trembling. At this time, he had no interest in paying attention to Lamia's extremely seductive body. This woman actually had the guts to directly contact the representative of the old faction, Katerina, and she even used his communicator. The man felt that his career was about to come to an end. He should not have squatted alone in Lamia's dormitory. How could he have known that this woman would be so crazy? Negotiation? No. Lamia's tone when talking to Katerina was clearly not a negotiation, but a naked threat, a threat with no fear. The discipline master could not figure out where Lamia's got the confidence to directly face the higher-ups of the Black Order. Or was it really, as the announcement said, that Lamia's had turned traitor and was very likely to side with the Holy Church? If you want it back, then come. Otherwise, I will send it to the Holy Church. Of course, there is also the thing that you have been preparing for so many years. Lamia's put away the necklace in her hand. Although with my level, there is no way I can know the whole plan, but I think, even if it is just a little bit of information, the Holy Church will be happy to receive it. On the communicator, Lamia's face was terrifyingly dark. She was on the other side of the ocean, far away, and before she could even say a word, the communicator had already been violently smashed into pieces by Lamia's. Okay. Lamia's sat down on the chair and looked at the middle-aged, balding discipline master with great interest. She suddenly laughed and said, "Don't I still have classes today?" This woman is crazy. This was the discipline master's only thought at this time. This woman is still in the mood to go to class after making a fuss about the Black Order. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS, 9 of 82. Chapter 16:22. When Wasco stepped into Father Stella's church once again, Father Stella was drying his colorful underwear in the yard. Under the old man's black priest robe, it was indeed so colorful. Wasco shook his head violently to get rid of these strange, distracting thoughts. That guy with the middle parting didn't come. Seeing that Father Stella was still drying his underwear and had no intention of stopping, Wasco could not help but ask in the end. The church was unusually quiet, as if nothing had happened. But Wasco clearly felt a strong fluctuation of power. It was clearly the fluctuation of holy power, and it was clearly not Stella's holy power. Speaking of which, Wasco still felt strange in his heart. Stella was clearly called a blasphemer by the descended angel, but he was still able to use that vigorous holy power. Middle parting? Only then did the priest stop and fell into his memories, then showed a sorrowful expression. "They're all dead." Wasco opened his mouth. He obviously did not believe it. "Dead?" Wasco suddenly sneered. "Where are the corpses? There's not a single corpse to be seen. Did you feed them all to the cats?" "How do you know?" Father Stella was suddenly shocked, then said angrily, "Wasco, I thought you were a good brother, so you've always had a hobby of peeking at me? Tell me, in the past, when we were bathing in the training camp, what were you doing behind my back?" The priest was now shocked and angry. He was so angry that his whole body was trembling. Needless to say how wronged he was. Wasco could only stare at him. Now, even he could not be sure whether Stella's mental state was good or bad, and whether what he said was true or false. But if it was said that the holy knights and clergy of the Holy Church had all fallen here, Wasco would never believe it. No matter what, this place should not be so peaceful. How long had it been since he took away those backup holy knights and settled them down before returning? Shaking his head, Wasco had no choice but to walk directly into the Holy Church. Perhaps the Holy Church's troops had not fully arrived yet. The powerful explosion of holy power just now might have been from the Holy Church's vanguard, but Stella had beaten them back. Most of the troops should be arriving soon. Wasco thought so and decided to stay and wait. Most importantly, no matter how he calculated, it seemed that he was the only one left in the Holy Church who could still talk to Father Stella, who was in a semi-crazy state. "Hey, Wasco, I have here a collection of black and white films of the phone, you nuns, that I've kept for 43 years. Do you want to watch them together?" Well, even he can't speak properly. Wasco slammed the door shut and picked up the satellite phone. "It's me. The church's troops haven't arrived yet. Anyway, I don't see them. The one leading the team this time is the Angel Hamley. It's an angel of the middle three. Maybe something happened on the way. After all, this time they're using the inhuman domain. Try to persuade Stella not to offend Hamley. Pope, if Stella becomes a blasphemer, what do you want me to do?" Wasco asked in a low voice. There was no response from the other end of the phone for a long time. When the Pope responded, he only said softly, "Act according to your own will. Wasco, believe in yourself, and that is to believe in your faith. You old man who's about to die, you've said nothing." The furious veteran Holy Knight hung up the phone immediately. Wasco took a deep breath and simply sat cross-legged on the ground to meditate and recover his strength. His holy power had undergone a transformation after being suppressed by the mysterious young man, and it had not completely recovered until now. Holy City. They really don't give me any face at all. In the Pope's large secret chamber, the old Pope could not help but shake his head and smile bitterly after the private phone call was disconnected. But after the bitter smile, there was melancholy. In the vast holy church, Wasco was probably the only one who could talk to him without any taboo, right? Ever since Stella left the Godly Might prison, the nostalgic look on the old man's face became more and more intense. His memories had long since returned to his distant childhood, when he was just an inconspicuous shepherd in the village, and Wasco was the son of a coachman. Stella, on the other hand, was the foolish son of a landlord. The memories were very brief. After that, the nostalgic look on the Pope's face instantly disappeared, replaced by solemnity, doubt, and even fear. At this moment, on the desk in front of the Pope, there were 5 palm-sized angel statues, and without exception, these 5 statues were all in the state of having their heads cut off. They should have been statues with heads, and each statue represented the situation of the angels who had descended this time. The decapitation of the angel statues meant that. How could this be? I couldn't get in touch with any of the troops dispatched this time, and Wasco said that he didn't see the appearance of the main troops, but the statues. An ominous premonition was spreading in the old Pope's heart. After a long time, the Pope seemed to have made a decision and resolutely reached out to turn the carving on the handle of the chair. With a click, the wall behind the chair in the large secret chamber he was in slowly opened, as if something was abruptly emerging from the crack in the wall that had just opened a little. The Pope drew in a cold breath abruptly, and in great shock pressed both hands on the carving on the handle and turned it back in the opposite direction. The wall slowly closed up again. At this moment, the Pope seemed to have used up all his strength and was already slumped in the chair, his face pale and drenched in cold sweat. A voice, a faintly discernible voice, seemed to have come from behind the Pope at this moment. "You will look for me. You will look for me again. I know. You will look for me again." The Pope got up at once and hurriedly walked out of the large secret chamber without looking back. Today's class will probably end here. In the class, Professor Pullen was tidying up his lesson plans as usual, but the bell for the end of class did not ring, which was not in line with Professor Pullen's usual style. Everyone knew that Professor Pullen had the habit of talking for a few more minutes after class. Thus, in a large classroom, dozens of pairs of eyes were cast on Professor Pullen at this moment. Professor Pullen smiled at this moment, and then slowly said, "Also, this will be my last class to teach everyone." The classroom was suddenly filled with discussions and gasps of surprise. Professor Pullen gestured for a moment. "Due to some personal reasons, I have already resigned from my position at the Institute. But everyone can rest assured that after I leave, the Vice Dean will temporarily take over my classes. After the start of the next semester, the new teacher should take office and your studies should not be affected. Or it will be easier for you to get credits from the new teacher." Laugh. Naturally, no student could laugh. Although it was difficult to get credits from Professor Pullen, At the same time, Professor Pullen really did have the rich knowledge of those old professors, and thus his popularity in the Institute could be ranked in the top 10. Although he wasn't particularly handsome, he was exceptionally pleasing to the eye. His perpetual white shirt, black trousers, and gloves, perpetual round-rimmed glasses, and long braids, as well as his harmless temperament, attracted the attention of a large group of bold flesh-type girls in the academy. A student stood up directly to ask a question. It was a girl. But Professor Pullen clearly did not intend to let the students ask questions. After a deep bow, he took his things and quickly left the classroom. A few bold girls hurriedly chased after him, but there was no trace of Professor Pullen in the corridor. Butterfly Society. He could be considered a regular. Except for Claudia, who had started new life, Professor Pullen was probably the one who came the most since the opening of Butterfly Society. However, in the previous few times, only Boss Luo was left in Butterfly Society, but this time, Miss Maid was obviously there too. Professor Pullen's impression of this female student was still 1 or 2 weeks ago, so he said apologetically, "What's your name again?" "Yui," Miss Maid said with a smile. "Very happy." Professor Pullen turned his head and looked at Boss Luo, then said with self-mockery, "I've lived for more than 30 years, and now I realize that I'm still alone." Boss Luo asked casually, "When are you going to officially leave, Professor?" "In a few days." Professor Pullen thought for a while and said, "I still have some things to do, and I plan to leave after dealing with them. I probably won't come back to this place in the future. I don't have the habit of staying in the same place twice, probably." "So," Boss Luo said thoughtfully, "if we can meet you again, it will probably be in other places, right? Don't you have a phone?" Professor Pullen laughed. "Although I don't use the phone much, I still have a phone number. I also check the mail. If it's you, I'll still remember to check the mail occasionally." As he spoke, Teacher Pu Lin asked for a piece of paper and wrote down an email address. Miss Maid took the initiative to put away the slip of paper. Then, she poured a cup of tea for Teacher Pu Lin. She also took out 1, 2, 3 for plates of snacks. It was quite sumptuous because of the sentence, "very happy." Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "I haven't finished reading your fairy tale book. I'll give it to you. After all, I've disturbed you so many times and came empty-handed every time." Professor Pullen smiled and said, "It shouldn't be valuable. I just bought it from a farmer when I was traveling. It's said to be the original manuscript, but I think they cheated me and wanted to sell it for more money." "It's the original manuscript," Boss Luo said abruptly, "and it's quite valuable. For me, the story on each page is like a beautiful story told by my ear." Professor Pullen was stunned, then shook her head and smiled. "I'm just a single lazy man in my 30s. Is it useless for you to make a good impression on me? I also have a small gift for you." Boss Luo said, "Take it as a farewell gift for you." A gift box was quickly sent to Professor Pullen from Miss Maid's hands. Professor Pullen didn't have the habit of opening it after going back. After the exquisite gift box was opened, there was another wooden jewelry box the size of one. But after the box was opened, there was only a small amount of black soil inside. "This is the soil of the red spider lily." Miss Maid smiled at this time. In addition to planting dead plants, it also has a very good effect of stabilizing the soul. Of course, this is what the gardener who sold us the soil said. Maybe he wanted to cheat us and sell it for more money. Professor Pullen was suddenly speechless, but she kept the box. Then she looked at Boss Luo and muttered, "I like your gift. Then I'll accept it. It's good that you like it." Boss Luo nodded. Only then did Teacher Pu Lin stand up and resolutely say, "Even though the time we spent together was very short, it was still a very pleasant memory. I hope we'll have the opportunity to meet again in the future. Oh, in any case, I'll still stay for 2 or 3 more days. Perhaps there'll be one last time we meet." Professor Pullen pushed open the door of Butterfly Society and walked out of the old schoolhouse. At this time, the cup of tea he drank was still warm. In fact, he basically didn't touch it, and so did the snacks. Miss Maid said with pity, "We wasted so much. What should we do?" Boss Luo nodded casually on the table, and the snacks on the table disappeared. He smiled and said, "Give him to Zhao Lu and Chun Mingming as a consolation gift." Of course, this was a good idea. Miss Maid gave him a sweet smile. Then, the door of Butterfly Society was knocked on again, and the one who knocked on the door and walked in was Lamia's, wearing a rather formal dress. The professional dress perfectly revealed the slender and well-proportioned figure of this nun who had been exercising for a long time. Probably only a few buttons on her chest were a little forced. I saw you on the new enrollment list. Lamia's walked in with a smile. There are only 2 new students during this period, a boy and a girl. I think it must be you. Luaccio, is this your name? I just know it now. While walking, the woman's black high-heeled shoes stepped on the wooden floor, making a clicking sound. Then, the charming face of Lamia's instantly became stiff, as if it was injected with excessive hyaluronic acid. The black high-heeled shoe on her right foot stepped into the floor at this time, and then broke. Hashtag. Chapter 16:23. Lamia's had trained her body balance for many years. Even in such a sudden situation, she was able to adjust her body in an instant so that she wouldn't trip. However, the heel was broken, and it was broken so thoroughly that Lamia's felt that the heel wasn't broken by a piece of wood, but by something. In short, Lamia's maintained her smile, elegance, and calmness. As a female teacher, she finally walked to Boss Luo and Miss Maid. Lamia's stretched out her hand to press down the skirt on her buttocks, and then sat down slowly in a lady-sitting posture. Miss Maid stood behind Boss Luo expressionlessly. Then she took away the cup that Mr. Poulin used. Soon she came out with a cup of tea and placed it in front of Lamia's. Smile. The tea was cold. She didn't even change the cup. Lamia's didn't speak until Miss Maid finished her work. Then she opened her mouth and said, Mr. Luaccio, I thought that a powerful magician like you would study science like engineering. I didn't expect you to study the simplest theology. Was theology simple? Perhaps for the existence of inhuman theology, mysticism was something that they would come into contact with from the beginning. Compared to the human scholars who studied in the academy according to historical records, it was more realistic to come into contact with them personally. I'm not talented in science and engineering. Boss Luo shook his head and said, Miss Lamia's, what's the matter? As a teacher in the academy, I should have the right to care about the extracurricular activities of the students, right? Lamia's blinked and said, Teachers should put the safety of the students first. Luaccio smiled and said, I'm in the academy. It shouldn't be a big problem. Lamia's said, That's not necessarily true. Even in the academy, it's not necessarily safe. Have you heard of a school shooting? A few years ago, a student came in with a gun and killed a student. It's very dangerous. As an inhuman, of course, he wouldn't be afraid of a small pistol in the hands of an ordinary student. This was just a topic to start a conversation. Oh, but what Lamia's didn't expect was that this young manor lord seemed to be really interested and started to ask questions. Of course, the school shooting that happened a few years ago was real, but Lamia's hadn't come to the school to teach at that time, so naturally, she didn't know too much. I heard that the student who committed the crime didn't receive the expected punishment because of his mental state, but he was still expelled from the academy. Obviously, that was all she knew. Furthermore, she only knew about it because she heard it mentioned by other teachers in the academy. Miss Lamia's lunch break is over. Miss Maid suddenly reminded him, as a tutor of the academy, do you need to teach your lovely students in the afternoon? I'm on leave today. Lamia stroked her hair. Luaccio, according to the agreement, during this period of time, I can freely move around the town, right? Of course, Lamia said with a smile. In that case, my range of movement will be around you. That's fine too, right? After school, do you want to take my car back? Also, the suspension system of my car is very well made. It will be very comfortable. No need. Boss Luo shook his head directly. I'm used to taking a walk in the town after school. I'm not in a hurry to go back. Besides, we have classes in the afternoon. By the way, Boss Luo suddenly left his seat and walked to the cabinet at the side. He took out something and turned around to put it in front of Lamia's before continuing. This is for you. It should be able to deal with the problem of your shoes temporarily. Looking at the all-purpose glue on the table, Lamia's eyebrows twitched unnaturally. She then picked up a glue and said indifferently, "Since you have classes, I won't disturb you. See you later." Miss Nunn walked quickly at this time because she stepped on the heel of the other side directly and broke it. Of course, it was well known that such high heels were naturally uncomfortable to walk in. "Go to class." Boss Luo acted as if nothing had happened. He took the servant girl's hand and gently squeezed it, then led her out of Butterfly Society Hospital, outside the door of the ICU. Mr. Smith had just returned from the shower when he saw a man in a suit sitting on a chair in the corridor outside the intensive care unit. He was in his 20s. Mr. Smith looked at the man's side profile and felt that he was quite familiar yet strange at the same time. "You seem to be a teacher of the college?" At last Mr. Smith recalled a face which he had occasionally seen in the olden days, a customer of his dining room. But somehow, Mr. Smith felt that this person seemed to be younger than before. Perhaps it was because of the makeup. Mr. Smith looked at the man in formal attire and thought thoughtfully. Mr. Poulin, or Teacher Poulin. Mr. Smith finally remembered the name of this restaurant's regular. "I'm passing by here," the man in formal attire said with a smile. "I heard that your wife is sick, so I plan to visit her. But it's not convenient to go in." Mr. Smith opened his mouth. In fact, they weren't familiar with each other. In the limited number of meals they had, they didn't talk much. They weren't friends. At best, they knew each other. If the man said something like a good friend, Mr. Smith would probably be grateful. But the man's words were a bit abrupt at this time. "Thank you." Mr. Smith thought for a while and sat down beside the man in formal attire. "Deborah will be happy if she knows." The man in formal attire said, "Yes, when your wife smiles happily, she is the most beautiful person in the world." Mr. Smith frowned. The tone of the man in formal attire vaguely gave him a strange feeling, but he didn't show it. He just nodded and didn't speak anymore. He didn't take the initiative to speak. He even hoped that the man could take the initiative to leave and end this sudden encounter. "I brought some gifts." The man in formal attire looked at Mr. Smith and said, "I hope you can accept them." Mr. Smith looked at the box that the man had been holding in his hand and putting on his lap. From the beginning, when he saw the man in formal attire, he actually noticed the box. It was a black box wrapped in beautiful patterned paper. This pattern was even a kind of flower that Mr. Smith's wife, Mrs. Deborah, liked. How did he know? Mr. Smith was more confused in his heart and even frowned. The man in formal attire said, "I used to be depressed and hesitant. Loneliness almost swallowed me. I suffered countless failures, but your wife's smile saved me." It was a smile that could warm people's hearts. "So, please believe me, your wife will be the person I'm most grateful to. She gave me life." Mr. Smith couldn't help but be moved. He could feel the sincerity in the man's words. In front of him, he seemed to see a lonely figure that was worn away by life, walking on the street like an empty shell. Suddenly, a smile saved him who had lost hope in life. He also had such an experience when he met his wife. "I was saved by such a smile before," as if the black and white time was dyed with the color of the rainbow in an instant. Mr. Smith finally took the gift box from the man in formal attire. He thought for a while and said, "Do you want to see my wife? I could take you in, but only once." "No need." The man in formal attire shook his head at this time. "It's enough to be here. Besides, it's the first time I talk to you like this, Mr. Smith. I'll remember it." I didn't say anything. Mr. Smith shook his head. "If there's a chance, I'll come again." The man in formal attire stood up and put on the tall hat at the same time. "Sorry to disturb you today." "Sir." What a strange guy. Looking at the back of the man in formal attire, Mr. Smith was a little dazed. He shook his head again and then walked into the ICU. After disinfecting and changing into clean clothes, Mr. Smith suddenly glanced at the gift box that was casually put aside when he entered the door. Perhaps on the day his wife wakes up and opens it herself, it would be a nice gift, wouldn't it? He hoped that day would come as soon as possible. He came to the bedside, pulled out his wife's hand from the quilt, and then held it tightly. Mr. Smith began to pray. His wife was a devout believer, and so was he later. Unconsciously, Mr. Smith lay on the bedside and fell into a deep sleep. He would suddenly fall asleep 1 or 2 times a day because of sleepiness. Maybe because he was too tired. Every time he suddenly fell asleep, Mr. Smith would think so after waking up. What he didn't know was that every time he fell asleep, someone would gently open the door of the ICU and then slowly walk in. A man in a white shirt and white gloves. Looking at the two holding hands, the man in the white shirt, Mr. Poulin showed a gentle smile on his face. He liked the tranquility and the scene in front of him very much, no doubt. But in the more than 30 years of life, he had seen countless scenes, but only this ordinary couple had such a feeling of liking. Should I also find a partner or something? Looking at Mr. Smith holding his wife's hand, he suddenly thought of the pair of students in the Butterfly Society. Mr. Poulin couldn't help but have a strange thought. Sure enough, after being single for too long, seeing this kind of pair would cause one to suffer a critical hit. He shook his head, opened the gift box that the student gave him, and then gently sprinkled the flower paste of the red spider lily on Mr. Smith and his wife. Flower paste of the red spider lily. I've only heard of this kind of thing, but I've never seen it before, Mr. Poulin said as he sighed. Yellow spring, a saying of the Eastern Hell. As a professional theology teacher, Mr. Poulin had a good knowledge of theology, and the concept of the yellow spring flashed through his mind quickly. In mysticism, in the legends of the East, there is indeed a set of theories of life and death, reincarnation and reincarnation that were far more complete than Western myths. But that was only a legend of the East. For Mr. Poulin, after a human died, there was only one place for the soul to return to, and that was the source of his death power. I hope I can see you being born these few days. Mr. Poulin patted the layer of mud on his gloves, looking at Mrs. Deborah's bulging belly. His smile became gentler, a small life. He quietly left the ward. In the isolation room outside, a gift box wrapped in patterned gift paper attracted his attention. Stop! Mr. Poulin had the thought of opening this box. But at this moment, footsteps came from outside the door. Obviously, the nurse from the hospital came to patrol the room. Mr. Poulin hesitated for a moment, then directly pushed open the door and walked out. He just happened to meet the nurse. Mr. Poulin smiled and nodded unhurriedly, and the nurse also nodded subconsciously. Mr. Poulin then walked out with a natural expression. After a while, the nurse said to herself doubtfully, "This guy, didn't he just leave? When did he change his clothes and come back? How about I go to visit another old friend?" Outside the hospital, Mr. Poulin looked at the sky. The sun was setting in the west. That was one of the thousands of sunsets he had seen, ordinary and ordinary. In this small town, the only person who could be considered a friend, other than the new student whom he had just met, was probably Father Stryker, who would secretly put a few pages of erotic thoughts in the scriptures when he preached to the believers. "Do you want to go and say hello before leaving?" The sun was setting in the west. He had experienced thousands of sunsets, and his figure was stretched out on the long street under such an ordinary sunset. Miss Maid inserted the key, and the beetle that was resurrected by Taisetsu's hands started again. Boss Luo sat on the co-pilot's seat and obediently buckled the seatbelt. So Miss Maid drove the car happily out of the parking lot of the college. At the same time, another black beetle in the corner of the parking lot also started at this time. Lamias held the steering wheel with one hand and put a cup of happy drink in the cup holder with the other hand. This was bought when she was bored waiting. Yes, she had been hiding in the car for the whole afternoon, and she even took a nap in the middle of the way. But when Lamias was ready to step on the accelerator and catch up with the car in front, the car suddenly shook, and then with a bang, the front of the car, billowing black smoke, came out. Hashtag PS1. November 82, PS2, lying asleep. Chapter 1624. Most people lived an ordinary life. Unless something unexpected happened, no one would lose hope for the future. At night, Wasco woke up from his meditation. The holy power in his body had almost recovered. He asked himself if he met the mysterious young man again, he would probably be suppressed again. No one provided any reference for Wasco, but this was indeed the only thought in his mind at this time. The main force of the Holy Church had not appeared yet. He suddenly remembered what Father Stella said before, and felt a little uneasy. But when he remembered that the main force of the Holy Church was led by a four-winged, descending angel who was the leader of the descending angels, he felt a little relieved. The phone rang. It was a call from a few of the Holy Night trainees who were staying in the apartment outside. Wasco looked at the time and wondered if he had hit them too hard. They just woke up now. He picked up the phone, and a series of anxious questions came directly from the other side. "I'm fine. From now on, you all stay in the apartment until I come back. In the meantime, you can order takeout." After Wasco hung up the phone, he walked out of the room. He walked all the way until he saw Father Stella in the church. There were no lights in the church, but many white candles were lit. On the seats, on the floor, and even on the steps, the candlelight swayed because of the airflow brought by Wasco when he opened the door. He saw Father Stella sitting on the floor at this moment. There was a brazier in front of Father Strahl, and at this time, he was constantly throwing pieces of thick square paper into the brazier from who knows where. "What are you doing?" Wasco frowned and came in front of Father Stella. Father Stella looked up and made a shushing gesture. "Lower your voice. Can't you see that I'm doing a religious rite? I'm ferrying the soul of the guy who died during the day." "Ferrying soul?" Wasco could not help but be startled and said subconsciously, "If you're ferrying soul, why don't you recite the scriptures and pray?" Of course, he knew what ferrying soul was. The clergymen of the Holy Church wandered in Europe and would subdue demons when they encountered ghosts. After subduing demons, they would naturally be ferrying soul. But Stella's method was obviously not the procedure of the Holy Church. He did not know what this stupid priest was up to. "You don't understand," Father Stella said seriously at this time. "The Holy Church's method won't work. I don't believe it. I learned this from the old monk who taught me Tongzigong. It's called burning clothes. I heard it's very effective." "You don't believe it, old bastard. You see, in the past, when we prayed for the souls of the dead, we didn't actually do anything. All we did was move our mouths. Those souls did leave, but they left with nothing. When he was alive, he was a pauper. After he died, he was still a pauper. How heartless and cruel was that? Burning clothes is different. Burn more money for them. Now that the times are advanced, they can even burn their girlfriends. TSK, TSK, look at how happy they are. This is solving the problem from the root." Wasco was taken aback by this charlatan's words. Finally, he recalled something. "Who exactly are you ferrying souls for?" Stella asked curiously. "Didn't I say that I'm ferrying the red coat in the middle and a bunch of useless holy knights and useless priests?" Wasco glared at Stella with a dark face. After a while, he pushed the door open angrily. If this was not the sacred place of the church, he would have kicked the door open. Father Stryker sat alone in front of the brazier and continued to burn his clothes. Tom Cruise crawled out from under the stool and rubbed against Father Stryker's thigh in a fawning manner. The priest suddenly slapped his thigh hard. "Oh no, what if I die that day and no one burns clothes for me?" As he spoke, the priest grabbed Tom Cruise and grabbed a bunch of gold and silver paper treasures. He hurriedly walked into the courtyard and dug a hole to bury the paper treasures. Then he propped up Tom Cruise's eyes and aimed at the burying hole. He said earnestly, "Remember this place. My sexual happiness in the underworld depends on you." Tom Cruise struggled to escape from Father Stella's hands. Before he left, he scratched the priest's face, but there was no scratch. Father Stella chased after him while cursing and disappeared in an instant. Meyer Lotta, who was forgotten in the corner of the courtyard and had shackles on his hands and feet, poked his head out nervously at this moment and then shrunk back. Last night, he picked up a broken saw blade. At this time, he was trying hard to break the shackles on his feet, and it looked like he was about to succeed. This time, he was not going to collect supplies. He planned to wait until the shackles on his feet were broken, and then sneak out of this church with the big iron ball. Although this church must have some incredible treasures, Marlotta was not in the mood at all. As to why he thought that there were treasures hidden in the church, others did not know that this church was actually suddenly transformed from a big hole. But how could he not know? The destroyed church had reappeared out of thin air. But at this time, he really did not have the mood to care about the treasures that might be hidden in the church. He felt the power of Hades. The power that instantly took away the lives of all the paladins and clergymen was exactly the same as described by the Lord of Darkness of Sothgod clan. Myr lost the crystal that the Lord of Darkness gave him to sense Hades, but he did not use the crystal, did he not? Myr even felt that his lost luck came back again. So, the speed of his hands that were rubbing the iron chains increased again, and his palms were almost bleeding. His breathing became faster and faster, and his eyes were bloodshot like a bull. When Lamias returned to the manor, it was already after dinner. At this time, the nun lady's face was black and gray. Her car was basically scrapped. Fortunately, under her pitiful appearance, there were still male students who volunteered to send her to the vicinity of the manor. But there was a partial torrential rain, and Lamias even fell into a muddy hole. When she climbed out, she happened to see a wild boar that was looking for food. God knew why a wild boar would appear in such a place. But after years of training, although she was a human, her physical fitness was not just for show. At least she escaped the misfortune of being eaten by the wild boar and successfully escaped. But along the way, she was in a panic and did not choose the path carefully. Her clothes were inevitably torn by weeds and branches, and she even lost one of her shoes. When she finally saw the light on the wall of the manor's gate in an unprecedented sorry state, Lamias was so moved that she almost had the impulse to kneel down and pray devoutly. Then she stepped on a sea urchin. Why? She seemed to be desperate for life, silently pulling out the sea urchin from the soles of her feet. Finally, she walked into the manor and came to the door of the house in a daze. Before she knocked on the door slowly opened. A ray of warm light shot out from the crack of the door, and then it was the servant girl's dim figure before the light and shadow. "Oh, Miss Lamias, you're back," the servant girl said in surprise at this time. "It's so late. You should inform us. Dinner time is over." Lamias sneered in her heart. "Inform? Have you ever told me your phone number?" "Don't worry," the servant girl smiled and said. "If you feel hungry, I can prepare food for you right away. I'm still very confident about my cooking." Lamias didn't want to eat the food given to her, but thinking that she really didn't eat anything today, her ordinary body couldn't bear it. Even if the servant girl made things difficult for her, Lamias was not a vegetarian. She had been receiving various difficult training since childhood and had tried all kinds of exotic ingredients. As long as it was protein, it was crispy. "Then I'll have to trouble you. I happen to be a little hungry." Lamias smiled. Even if she looked quite bad at this time, she still had to keep smiling. But when she looked at a plate of sea urchin dishes in front of her, Lamias felt that she seemed to be too naive. "Well, Miss Lamias, I wish you a pleasant meal," the servant girl whispered at this time. "In addition, after 9 o'clock, I hope you can keep quiet, or you will disturb the master's rest. I usually go to bed early." The servant girl nodded and left in a happy mood. Lamias looked at the big bowl of sea urchin rice, hesitated for a moment, and finally the instinct of replenishing strength overcame her worry, and she took a small bite. Delicious. She didn't expect it, so she opened her eyes wide at once. She felt that her whole body seemed to be washed. Even her messy hair seemed to be much smoother. Ding! The iron chain had been sawed off unknowingly. When a moment came, Myr couldn't help but have a feeling of tears in his eyes. He was too difficult, from a senior cadre of Sothgod clan to a mortal after losing his power. Until now, he knew the preciousness of power. "Hello." But before Myr had time to be moved by himself, he suddenly heard a voice behind him, which suddenly made Myr, who was always frightened, jump up at once. "It's you." At the window of the dim room, the figure standing there was Teacher Pullen, who sent him to Father Stella. He was tricked by this seemingly harmless man in a white shirt and fell into this trap. "I'm here to see you." Teacher Pullen smiled slightly. "I'm leaving soon. It seems that you're living well now. Very well." "You're leaving?" Myr suppressed his anger at once, and frowned at the same time, subconsciously asking why. "To see other sceneries." Teacher Pullen said quite casually, "Life is a non-stop journey, and I like to see the sceneries along the way." Myr shook his head, holding the big iron ball out of the utility room with some difficulty. "Let's make a deal. Before you leave, can you help me get rid of this thing, and I'll owe you a favor?" Teacher Poulin thought for a while and won my Lotta's request. He reached out and broke all the chains on my Lotta's body. My Lotta was silent for a while and then asked, "Give me a way to find you. I don't owe favors to others." Teacher Poulin shook his head. "I introduced you here, but I didn't expect you to suffer some hardships. Forget about the favor. Just take it as a little compensation. In addition, as a mortal, it's really not easy." My Lotta didn't comment. Teacher Poulin smiled and said, "Although it's not easy, they are still very strong to live. And I'll go and say hello to Father Stella." Watching Teacher Poulin walk toward the church, my Lotta couldn't be happier. Who knew where that old faker would come from and knock him a few more times? He was really afraid of Father Stella, and he couldn't understand it with common sense. At this time, Teacher Poulin was going to pester him, so it was naturally better. Freedom. He felt this aura again, and his heart was filled with courage and hope for the future. It was as if there was a brand new strength gushing out, and his footsteps couldn't help but become more steady. He felt something strange coming from the bottom of his feet, and he couldn't help but look down. It was the shards of the chain that had been broken by Teacher Poulin and thrown on the ground. He had inadvertently stepped on them and shattered them. Of course, he couldn't step on the shards of the chain. Maybe in the past, but obviously not now. Mio Lotta subconsciously crouched down and extended his hand to grab a section of the iron chain. At this moment, the iron chain in his hand suddenly decayed and then broke apart. Not only that, the areas where the iron chain touched, the grass even began to wither. This is... Teacher Poulin found Father Stella in the confessional of the church. When he found him, the priest's face was covered with an indescribable magazine, and his snoring wasn't very loud. Teacher Poulin gently knocked on the door of the small dark room in the confessional. Father Stella woke up with a start and quickly put away the magazine while wiping his saliva. "Oh, sponsor Daddy who donated money. No, lost traveler, please tell me what you feel guilty about. I am Father Stella, and I can help you." "Hey, it's you? Why are you here again after such a short time?" Teacher Poulin only felt that this concept was strange, but he didn't think too much about it. He just smiled and said, "I will be leaving here in 2 days. Now that I think about it, I haven't entered your confessional even once, so I want to experience it. Can I talk to you?" "Money, forget it, we are acquaintances." Father Stella shook his head and lowered his head to continue reading the magazine. However, he allowed Teacher Poulin to enter. Teacher Poulin didn't mind. After sitting down, he thought for a while and asked, "Father, what do you think death is?" The priest casually turned a page of the magazine, and without thinking, he said perfunctorily, "Those without money die of poverty. Those without girlfriends die of masturbation. Those who are unlucky die of a car crash. Those who are rich, how the hell do I know what cards they have to play to kill themselves? In any case, I can't kill you. All right, next." Teacher Poulin smiled and suddenly said, "Do you want to kill me?" Father Stella was startled and suddenly raised his head. He looked at Teacher Poulin through the lattice on the wooden board of the small dark room. After staring at him for a while, he asked tentatively, "Is your head okay? I will fight with you. Don't try to scam me. I don't have money." Teacher Poulin smiled again, stood up, and said softly, "Goodbye." Chapter 16:25. When Mr. Poulin left, Father Stella didn't ask him to stay. He didn't even want to come out of the confessional small dark room. Mr. Poulin didn't care. He looked up at the stars. The stars were dim, and it seemed like a storm was coming. Most seaside towns were like this. Maybe there would be a light rain before dawn. Mr. Pulley planned to go to the hospital again. Before he left, if there was nothing special, he should be there. He knew that the little life would be born in 1 or 2 days. When he went out, someone stood in front of Mr. Poulin and stopped him. "My Lotta, you haven't left yet. Is there anything else?" Mr. Poulin asked curiously. At this time, my Lotta looked at him strangely. But my Lotta said, "There is something I want to ask you." "What is it?" My Lotta thought for a while and said, "Your power. Is your power related to death?" When those broken chains fell to the ground, the grass nearby had already dried up. Even the ants in the soil died. Teacher Pu Lin couldn't help but furrow his brows. He actually didn't care that my Lotta knew about this matter. What he cared about was that his death energy had unexpectedly already overflowed, and he himself hadn't noticed it. He subconsciously looked at the gloves he used to confine the power of death. In theory, this pair of gloves could prevent the power of death from leaking out. It seemed that after the fourth explosion of the power of death, the effect of this pair of gloves had begun to lose its effect. It seemed that his decision to leave was not wrong. Don't you already have the answer in your heart? Mr. Poulin shook his head and said, Why do you still ask me personally? As expected, my Lotta was instantly overjoyed. He hurriedly walked to Mr. Poulin. His eyes were blazing. The goddess of luck didn't abandon me. It turns out that I was so close to my goal. Do you know that I came here all for you? Well, I don't want to know now, Teacher Pu Lin said lightly. After that, he took half a step back lightly. It was mainly because he was bald, muscular, and strong. It was really very difficult to reverse his approval of a certain concept. Nether King, my Lotta took a deep breath and said, Does your power come from Hell King? Tell me, where is the King of Hell? Nether King? Teacher Pu Lin subconsciously furrowed his brows. Even if he wasn't a theology teacher who had already left his post, as someone who walked between non-humans and humans, he obviously knew which ones the Underworld King was referring to. Because most of the myths in the world were chaotic, and some of the myths were intertwined with each other and evolved, there were actually a few gods who were called Pluto. Of course, since they were Pluto, they could naturally be associated with death. I don't know the Nether King. Teacher Poulin shook his head at this time. I can indeed control some abilities that bring death, but it seems to be innate. It shouldn't be from Pluto, as he said. Impossible. You lied to me. My Lotta was agitated at this time. He didn't care that he had no power and directly grabbed Teacher Poulin's arm. You must know where the Nether King is. Perhaps Teacher Poulin really didn't know where the Nether King was, because he himself might be the Nether King. This thought flashed through my Lotta's mind almost at the moment when he recognized the power of death. But it was also denied in the next moment. What was the Nether King? The Nether King was the murderer of the Greek gods. It was the ultimate weapon created by the master of the underworld to fight against Mount Olympus. The existence of the Nether King would only bring death to the world. If Teacher Poulin was the Nether King, the present world would have become the new underworld. My Lotta had seen the Nether King before. When he first came to the present world with his companions, he had already met the Nether King. His companions died because of the appearance of the Nether King. My Lotta couldn't see the Nether King's appearance clearly at that time, but he could remember the feeling that the Nether King gave people. The feeling that the ordinary teacher and the man in the black suit gave people was completely different. So, Teacher Poulin must have come into contact with the Nether King and then obtained a trace of the power of death from the Nether King. Even if it was just a trace of power, it was enough to make Teacher Poulin strong. After all, the Nether King was created by the master of the underworld. It was a super weapon that even the gods on Mount Olympus were terrified of. I have no reason to lie to you. Teacher Poulin pushed my Lotta's hand away. He was afraid that he couldn't control himself. If the power of death leaked to my Lotta's body again, it would probably cause him to lose a lot of life or even death. No, no, no. My Lotta was a little panicked. Listen to me. I'm looking for the Nether King, but I don't mean to destroy it. You don't have to worry at all. On the contrary, the reason why I came to find the Nether King is to invite it back. Only the Nether King can let our Soth God clan regain the glory of the past. So, in fact, you still want to obtain the power of the Nether King, right? Teacher Poulin shook his head and said, I hope that the power of the Nether King can fulfill your wish. You don't understand. You really don't understand. My Lotta said emotionally, the Nether King is a remnant of the God clan. It is the power of the God clan. No matter which side it belonged to in the War of the Gods, the most important thing is the present. The current Soth God clan. We are all descendants of the gods. We are inseparable. Whether it is the sky, the sea, or the remnants of the underworld, we are already closely connected. We only want to restore the glory of the age of the gods. You can use the power of death. In theory, you're also a member of our Soth God clan. You also have an obligation to contribute to the great revival of the Soth God clan. Poulin, believe me, you will become the hero of our clan. You will be the only son of death. Mylata was really trying to express something. Teacher Poulin could feel the urgency in his heart. Unfortunately, I am not interested in this. Moreover, the power of death in my body will not be of help to anyone. Apart from bringing death, it has no other use. If you want to find traces of the Nether King, I suggest you go to the European continent. That is the origin of Hades. Of course, you can also go to ancient Egypt to dig. Maybe you can find clues about Osiris. Anyway, it is the Nether King, the Lord of Darkness. Mylata gritted his teeth and said, I will take you to see the Lord of Darkness. After you see it, you will understand everything and believe me. The Lord of Darkness? The Lord of Darkness is a great existence that survived the war of the gods. Mylata said with a pious face, the great Lord of Darkness is different from us descendants of the gods. It is the real deal. Since the age of the gods, it has been a real god. It is the true god of the Soth God clan. Its knowledge will lead us back to the peak and take back the god kingdom from the shameless thieves of the Magician Association. The gods are dead, but the so-called Lord of Darkness survived. It is really not easy. Teacher Poulin nodded. Okay, I will go with you to meet this Lord of Darkness. Anyway, I have always been very interested in the origin of the power in my body. Then what are you waiting for? Mylata was instantly overjoyed. He could not wait to grow wings and fly back to the Soth God clan to meet the Lord of Darkness. But he suddenly remembered another thing. Having lost his power, he could not open the coordinate channel to the inhuman domain. Do you have the coordinates to enter the inhuman domain? Teacher Poulin sized Mylata up from head to toe. He only looked at this baldy who was almost 2 meters tall, so ashamed and indignant that he couldn't raise his head. Only then did he slowly say, I don't have this kind of thing, but it seems that there are a few public coordinate channel stations in the modern world. I actually passed by a few before. You have not been to the inhuman domain, even once? Mylata said in disbelief. Teacher Poulin shook his head. I was not interested in it before. The modern world is very big, and there are many places I have not been to. There is no need to go to new places. Then let's go now. Not now. Teacher Poulin shook his head. I have to wait for 2 more days before leaving here. Okay, 2 days it is, Mylata said without thinking. But in these 2 days, you're not allowed to leave me. Tell me more about the Socius God clan. Teacher Poulin waved his hand. There's also the matter of Hell King. I have to go to the hospital now, so let's talk on the way. In that case, the Lord of Darkness is actually a pitiful fellow sealed in the stone wall, and your Socius God clan is just a small group that has been suppressed by the Magician Association and is forced to hide, right? On the way, looking at Mylata's expression that almost wanted to go berserk, Teacher Poulin pushed up his glasses and said very helplessly, after listening to you say so much, I keep feeling that your Socius God clan is really doing something that has no future. How about your Soth God clan reconcile with the Magician Association? What did you say? Mylata almost screamed. Teacher Poulin pushed up his glasses again and said, You also said that your Sovan God clan has already undergone a split. A portion of your clansmen have already integrated into the Magician Association, and it seems that some of them have reached the top. I feel that this portion of clansmen who left are very far-sighted. If the remaining people of your clan nod, the final result will probably be a happy ending? Impossible, Mylata said angrily. The Magician Association only intends to dilute and assimilate our bloodline to obtain the power of the gods from us. The power of the great gods can't be tainted by mortals. Teacher Poulin smiled and said, Let me think. If the knowledge I learned didn't lie to me, the gods in the era of the gods were more open. They almost sowed everything. Mylata trembled with anger. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't have the power now, he would have knocked this guy unconscious and tied him up to bring him home. Okay, I'll still go and see the Lord of Darkness that you worship, Teacher Poulin said coldly. Mylata calmed down a little. I said so much, and now it's your turn. How did you get the power of Hell King? I said that I had it since I was young. Teacher Poulin shrugged. It's like a talent. My Lotta sneered in his heart. Keep pretending. When the Lord of Darkness goes to the Lord of Darkness, I'll see how long you can keep your mouth shut. At this time, my Lotta suddenly remembered something. It was the death of the knights and clergymen of the Holy Church during the day. Although he didn't see who did it, he clearly felt the shroud of the power of death. Now that he knew that Teacher Poulin also had the power of death, he directly made the connection. So, my Lotta directly looked at Teacher Poulin and asked, "Oh right, do you have a grudge with the Holy Church?" "No." Teacher Poulin shook his head. "Why do you ask?" "No." My Lotta frowned. "If not, why did you harvest the lives of those holy knights and clergymen during the day? Was it to help that old faker Stella?" Teacher Poulin suddenly stopped. It wasn't because of my Lotta's last words, but because a passerby suddenly fell down in front of the road. This person had just walked past the streetlight on the sidewalk, and then suddenly fell down without any warning. A drunkard? My Lotta frowned. Who would suddenly fall down in the street like this? Many of them were drunkards. "No." Teacher Poulin said, "He is dead." "Dead?" My Lotta was a little surprised, but he didn't panic. His hands were once stained with blood. In the early days of the inhuman domain, there were all kinds of violence and blood. If he is dead, then he is dead. What's so strange about it? Humans are so fragile. But suddenly, he remembered what he had suffered in the church as a powerless person. He suddenly felt irritated and shut his mouth. "No, it's very strange." Teacher Poulin directly walked up and came to the side of the dead passerby. He squatted down and carefully examined. "What's strange?" My Lotta asked from behind. Teacher Poulin thought for a while and said, "He will indeed die, and it will be in the near future, because his body is not very good, and he has heart disease. But it won't be today. His time has been prematurely ended." "You mean to say that he was actually killed?" My Lotta said with dissatisfaction. "Just say it directly. Why make it so complicated?" Teacher Poulin shook his head. There were some things that he couldn't explain to my Lotta in detail. Not everyone was like his new student, who had outstanding comprehension ability. "Look," my Lotta suddenly shouted in a low voice. He was talking about the road ahead. The people who were walking sparsely on the road ahead suddenly fell to the ground one after another. Bang! A car suddenly lost control and crashed into the entrance of a clothing store on the side of the road. "Who?" Teacher Poulin looked at the chaotic and strange street in surprise. People were actually dying one after another, ending the life of this town prematurely. // Chapter 16:26. The pedestrians didn't make any sound as they fell down one by one. Then they stopped breathing and welcomed death. My Lotta was shocked, but he didn't lose his composure. He checked them one by one. After walking forward for about 10 meters and seeing 3 corpses, he couldn't help but be surprised. Could it be a curse? He didn't see any fatal wounds on the townsfolk, so he could only deduce that an inhuman might have dealt a mental blow to them. But in fact, even if a mental blow had been dealt, the human body should still be active for a short period of time. But these people lost all their vitality in an instant. Mr. Poulin looked up at the sky and didn't say anything. "What are you looking at?" My Lotta's heart trembled. He felt that he might have missed something because his power was sealed. "You can see now." Mr. Poulin reached out his hand and tapped on my Lotta's forehead. See? My Lotta's eyes immediately focused. He saw that under the night sky, little bits of light were slowly floating into the sky. The light was like fireflies. It was a beautiful scene, but at the same time, it was terrifying. This was because these fluorescent lights were the souls of people who had died. They could become spirits, ghosts, or evil spirits. It all depended on the environmental conditions at the time. But obviously, these souls didn't become anything. They were just in their original state. My Lotta immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. He suddenly realized what Teacher Poulin meant when he said that the town's time had ended. Someone, or rather, some power was harvesting all the lives in this town. Pluto. In an instant, the answer appeared in my Lotta's mind. Pluto had appeared. Only Pluto could bring death. I found it. I finally found it. The ecstasy instantly swept away all of my Lotta's gloominess. He laughed wildly and was about to chase in the direction where the souls were gathering. Hell King would definitely be at the end of the gathering of souls. You better not be too far away from me. But at this moment, Teacher Poolin's words were like a basin of cold water, making my Lotta feel as if he had sucked in a breath of extremely cold air. Leave me too far, and you will also become like them. My Lotta, who had just taken a step forward, stiffened his body in an instant. The foot he had just lifted stopped abruptly. He instinctively shuddered, and with an ugly expression, he turned around and asked, "What do you mean? You will die." Teacher Pullen's answer was unusually simple and crude. "Are you going? You will definitely go, right? That's where the souls of the dead go." My Lotta looked at Pullen anxiously and said, "I seem to hear the call of Hades. It's summoning me." Teacher Pullen said, "No, you're just too excited, so you are hallucinating. It is not calling for anyone. Wake up, don't dream." "I don't believe it." My Lotta's eyes seemed to spit fire. "Then take 5 steps forward." Teacher Pullen thought for a while and said, "Beyond 5 steps, it is no longer safe. I have already reminded you. Your life is in your own hands." My Lotta took 4.5 steps. At the last half step, his whole body was covered in cold sweat, as if he could not take another step no matter what. He even felt despair. Cowardice, fear, and all kinds of negative emotions exploded. Recalling the experiences of these days, the pride of the past was instantly shattered, and the last bit of self-respect he had left was completely trampled on by life. "I am just a piece of sh*t." He clenched his teeth and finally took the last half step. He closed his eyes tightly. Even if he really welcomed death at this moment, he was already fearless. He felt as if his soul had been sublimated and only felt his whole body relaxed. But he did not die like Teacher Pullen said. He was still standing, and nothing in front of him changed. "I'm not dead. I'm not dead." My Lotta was absent-minded at this moment, and then ecstasy followed. "Ha ha, I'm not dead. Did you see? Hades did not take my life. It must have sensed the blood of the gods in my body. I will become one of its people. Gods will not slaughter their own people. No, it is just that I am behind you." Teacher Pullen's voice came from behind my Lotta, neither slow nor fast. My Lotta broke down. Looking at the 5 steps in front of him, he suddenly lost the courage to take another step. But Teacher Pullen continued to walk forward, and my Lotta suddenly trembled, quickly followed, and asked anxiously, "Where are you going?" "To see what happened." Teacher Pullen said indifferently, "Besides, I also want to see what Hades looks like. If there's really a Hades, maybe it can answer some of the questions I have all along." My Lotta did not say anything. As long as Teacher Pullen was willing to go, it seemed to be good. Although he had lost the power as an inhuman, he was very sure that Hades was there. At this time, in the town, more and more townsfolk were falling down. The range was not limited to the center of the town, but had already spread to the surroundings. Those souls that slowly floated into the night sky and were attracted by something, gathering in the same place, gradually increased. It was like a large wetland, and then it came to midsummer night. Deep sea. There were countless sea routes here, no matter whether it was above sea level or below sea level. It was even a mysterious area that had far more secrets than the land. A huge shadow was moving under the sea. In the gloomy depths of the sea, the body of this huge creature was constantly flashing with different kinds of faint lights. In a huge monster. Report, the wreckage of the Nautilus has been found. Do we want to explore it? As the captain of another huge submarine of the Black Order, Justin was one of the masterminds of the new faction. When the subordinate was reporting, Justin was thinking about the intention of the religious order's chief. He was a little confused because almost 80% of the Black Order's headquarters power was used this time. In other words, this submarine sailing in the deep sea at this time was almost all the power of the Black Order. Those who stayed were only some field personnel and ordinary members who did not have access to the core. They stayed only to let the headquarters operate at a minimum level. Why would the chief give such an order? Not only that, even Master Pride was directly brought along. Even the things like the 100-year plan were directly moved into the submarine. Speaking of which, it was fortunate that this submarine was not a product of the civilization on the land. Otherwise, there was no way to prepare everything in such a short time. At this time, the subordinate's report interrupted Captain Justin's thoughts. If he was the one sailing this time, he could give the order immediately, but the chief of the Black Order was here. Captain Justin had no choice but to contact the chief directly to ask about the Nautilus. But the answer he got was, there is no need to waste time on a silent Nautilus. Land as soon as possible. His tone was resolute, as if this Nautilus was just an insignificant wooden boat. This Nautilus was once the most powerful submarine of the Black Order, and even now, many of its functions were still incomparably powerful. But the chief's order could not be disobeyed. This was a belief that came from Justin's heart. Although the Black Order was divided into the new faction and the old faction, and although the secret struggle between the two factions was fierce, as long as it was the chief's order, they could not disobey it. Every core member of the upper echelon of the Black religious congregation had a spiritual suggestion placed on them by the chief. Under the influence of the chief's enormous spiritual power, these core members were like puppets. The new faction and the old faction were fighting endlessly because of master pride, but that was only because the chief had been silent. At this time, when the chief gave the order, the Black Order mobilized most of its overall strength in the shortest time possible. It could be said that they had turned out in full force. Unlike the Holy Church, which was intertwined, the Black Order was completely a one-man order of the supremely talented chief. Find a suitable landing point as soon as possible. At this time, Captain Justin directly gave the order. At the same time, a guy who gave him an incomparable headache appeared in front of Captain Justin's eyes. What appeared on the screen was the extremely ugly face of Master Pride. Not only that, some scenes in the room also appeared in front of Captain Justin's eyes at the same time. Although it was only some of the scenes in the corner, when Captain Justin saw half of the girl's body covered with scars, his eyebrows suddenly twitched. There aren't enough toys, send some more. Master Pride only said this one sentence, and then directly turned off the communication. In the control room, a group of subordinates looked at the captain one after another. Captain Justin heaved a sigh of relief at this time. He lay down rather weakly. He looked at the angry eyes of his subordinates and finally sighed. He waved his hand and said, "This time, send a few more over. For the future holy war and rise, some sacrifices are necessary." In the control room, an extremely oppressive silence suddenly filled the air. Why did they have to constantly satisfy Pride's request? Wouldn't it be better to directly control him and torture him? How could Captain Justin not know what these young people were thinking? But what these young people didn't know was that this Master Pride couldn't be killed, and he couldn't even be controlled. He could refine his own body into something else, and thus break away from all seals. The so-called barriers could also be directly refined by him, and become ions drifting in the air. As for human firearms, in Master Pride's eyes, they were nothing but a pile of scrap iron. More importantly, if you couldn't kill him, he would kill you. Rather than saying that the Black Order obtained the right to cooperate with Master Pride by satisfying his request, it was better to say that in order to obtain Pride's help, the Brotherhood did everything they could to curry favor with Pride. The relationship between the two sides was already unbalanced from the very beginning. After turning off the communication in a luxurious room, even though they had moved to a place sailing under the sea, Pride still insisted on a comfortable environment. This room originally belonged to the chief of the Black Order, but now he had taken it. A bunch of slaves. Master Pride immediately sneered. "You've already missed the opportunity to control me." The opportunity to control him was only at the very beginning. When he had fallen into this small world, he had been suppressed by this small world to the point that he had almost completely lost his power, and even an ordinary person could kill him. Now, after a period of recuperation, he had already analyzed part of the world will of this small world, and had written in some of the rules from his origin small world, allowing the ability of alchemy of composition to be used. After that, the Black Order was no longer in his eyes. The reason why he had stayed was because he needed some slaves in this small world, and he was also quite interested in the things that the Black Order lived in. That was why he had been patient enough to play around. The Demon King of Alchemy, the man who used despair to rule the world. This was Pride's life before he left his origin small world. He could have continued his life of toying with the entire world, but after his power had reached the end of its peak, he had actually gone insane and wanted to turn the world into his own plaything. And in the end, he had become a tool for the world to destroy his civilization. However, Pride was indeed a saddened and insane person. When his civilization was destroyed, he did not hesitate to mobilize most of the alchemists in the empire and use billions of life force to create a passage to this small world. He had even refined his own body into a philosopher's stone that could store the power of alchemy of composition, and entered the void. A general success was built on the bones of 10,000 men, and his success was the destruction of the entire empire. My power is still far from being restored. Master Pride was thinking about something as he enjoyed the service of a prostitute in fear and trepidation. He had fought with his enemy in a crack, and in the end, because of a terrifying ripple that disturbed the dimension, he had lost his footing and fell into this small world where the gods' beliefs were extremely chaotic and abnormally diverse. Pride believed that if he could survive, his enemy could do the same. Otherwise, he would have already destroyed his enemy in the void. Therefore, there was no guarantee that his enemy was currently hiding in that corner of this world, secretly developing and accumulating power. "You're hurting me." Suddenly, Master Pride snorted coldly and swung his fist. Before the prostitute could say anything, her neck had already been broken by Pride. He liked the feeling of torturing and killing young girls, especially women who were beautiful, goddesses in the eyes of countless people. The feeling of torturing and killing them was even more addictive. The moment the young girl's neck was broken, she was immediately thrown away by Pride. He swept his gaze around and saw another girl hiding in the corner, shivering as she crawled over. However, at this moment, the screen in the luxurious room suddenly turned on, and what appeared in front of Master Pride's eyes was an abnormally old face that was covered in wrinkles. "Pride, are you awake?" The old man was the chief of the Black Order. ######PS1. There's a catch-up tonight later. Try to finish it before 12:30. PS2. Also, I'll recommend a new book that needs to be watered with love to grow. Player's Super Justice by 10 Strings Byuki. Chapter 16:27. In a luxurious room, the moment the chief of Black Order appeared on the screen, the few conscious girls in the room instantly fainted. "Pride, you should be in the lab right now, preparing for the refinement work," the old man on the screen said weakly. "If you want to enjoy it, I'll continue to satisfy your requests after the refinement." Master Pride sneered, looking at the old man who was about to die at any moment. How could he not know that this old man's life was already at its limit? What a pitiful fellow, having to endure the fear of death every moment. "You seem to have forgotten your identity." Master Pride shook his head. "Perhaps you want me to do what I did the last time? Quietly walk up to you and put a knife to your throat to make you remember something. Of course, it's fine if I don't use a knife this time. What do you want to use? I can satisfy you." The chief of the order suddenly shot out a strange blue light from his eyes. Master Pride said carelessly, "I know your spiritual power is stronger than the average person, but your body can't support it. Can it? You want to live?" "No, it's because I want to live," the chief of Black Order suddenly said in a low voice. "That's why I want to change something." "For example?" Master Pride asked with a mocking expression. "A master-slave relationship." The chief of Black Order's eyes shone with blue light. "I'm afraid of death, so I rarely use my power. But now that I'm about to die, how can I not use my power?" "Pride, kneel." Master Pride was stunned for a moment, then shook his head. This old man must have lost his mind before he died. However, his expression suddenly became extremely strange. His body was now kneeling on the ground. Master Pride was stunned for a moment, then shocked and angry. "What did you do to me? When I found you, I had already secretly planted a spiritual seed in you." The blue light in the eyes of the black religious congregation's chief gradually faded. All this time, the satisfaction I've shown you is merely to numb you. Unbeknownst to you, this seed has long been planted in your mind. Now, with just a thought, I can make your mind explode and turn you into an idiot. You dare. Master Pride gritted his teeth and said, "If you want to destroy my spirit, you'll have to pay with your life. In the past, I didn't dare, but now I dare. I'm about to die. Why wouldn't I dare?" The chief laughed maniacally. "If you dare to be stubborn with a dying man, then come. Let's perish together." Master Pride was silent. "Do what you should do. Pride, don't test my remaining patience before I die." Communication was shut down. Only then did Master Pride raise his head, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Suddenly, the corners of his mouth curved into a thin smile, and he said in a low voice, "Naive, it's just a little bit of spiritual power. If it's someone who hasn't explored the subworlds of arcana civilizations, they'll probably fall for your trick, right?" At this moment, a slight vibration came. It was time to log in. "I'll play with you natives then." A hint of mockery flashed in Master Pride's eyes. He then walked out of the luxurious room. At the same time, in the control room, Captain Justin's seat suddenly sank. Then, through a long metal passage, he finally slid into a solemn room. There were 7 solemn-looking old men and middle-aged men in the room. Among them was the leader of the combat nuns, Katerina. Captain Justin looked around and said in a low voice, "The chief has given me full authority to command this operation. No one has it, right?" Everyone was silent. Captain Justin waved his hand. A screen rose from the conference table. It was a map of the town. A bright dot of light appeared on it. "The main target of this operation is Father Stella, then the capture of Lamias and the recovery of the holy relic of reversal," Captain Justin said quickly. Captain Justin quickly said, "The light spot on the map is the signal released by the inverse cross of fear, armor carried by Sister Grant and the others on the last trip. Lamias would not know how to remove the signal release. She might be planning to lure us to the location of the signal. With just a few pieces of the inverse cross of fear, it's impossible for her to fight against the religious order," a voice said. "She still has the God-slaying armor. It's more troublesome. I've already mentioned before that we can't arbitrarily give the God-slaying armor to Lamias just because it has the highest compatibility. So, Katerina, shouldn't you take some responsibility for this matter?" Katerina was silent in front of her seat. There was no joy or anger on her face. Before daybreak, Captain Justin suddenly knocked on the table. "We must complete all the missions this time. This is the chief's order. So, everyone, please don't put unnecessary disputes in this meeting." "Oomph," that person snorted. "The last time we sent Sister Grant and the others, it should have been easy to capture them, but they actually let Lamias escape. Even the Nautilus sank. It's really difficult to feel at ease and continue to assign the mission of capturing Lamias to Katerina." Katerina remained silent. Captain Justin frowned. "Karen Ching, so? That person?" Karen said calmly, "I will be in charge of capturing Lamias." Hearing this, Captain Justin looked at Katerina with an inquiring expression. "I have no objections." Katerina finally spoke at this time. "You're the commander of this operation. You decide." "All right, then." Captain Justin nodded. "Then the matter of capturing Lamias will be handed over to Karen. Next is Father Stella. Judging from the situation of Stella destroying the Nautilus, I'm afraid that at least 3 combat regiments will be needed to capture him. So this time, the combat nuns, the Monster Corps, and the Hitman Corps will move out together. The warship will provide the necessary firepower support." Not enough. Unexpectedly, Katerina suddenly said at this time, "If we want to deal with Stella, 3 combat regiments are not enough. I apply to use the remaining 2 highest-grade crystal armors of the Order, Calamity and Dawn." "Okay," Captain Justin said calmly. "I originally planned to use Calamity and Dawn. The chief's intention is to go all out and not leave any room for maneuver. Even if we have to flatten this town, we won't hesitate." They were all shocked. Even Katerina couldn't help but show a hint of surprise. If they didn't hesitate to flatten this town, wouldn't it be equivalent to giving the British Knight Organization a reason to directly start a war? The Knight Organization didn't care about the matters between the Black Order and the Holy Church, but this was equivalent to pushing the Knight Organization to the side of the Holy Church. Everyone, at this time, the captain said in a deep voice, Stella can become the best source of holy power. With the source of holy power, our 100-year plan will be completed. At that time, we will be fearless of all forces and power. The leaders of the Monster Corps and the Hitman Corps discussed the details of the operation with me. Katerina sighed. She already understood the chief's determination this time, and vaguely felt that the chief was afraid that he really couldn't wait. At this time, it showed that the chief was staking everything on this one throw. I'll take my leave first. At this time, Karen also stood up and left his seat. Looking at the serious faces of Katerina and the others, he smiled and said, Sorry, I didn't expect that I would choose a relatively easy mission. Then, I'll have to trouble you. I'll prepare champagne and wait for you to complete the mission and come back to celebrate. Katerina looked at Karen coldly. It was just a glance, and then she ignored him. Karen, who was about to walk out of the conference room, suddenly stopped. By the way, capturing Lamia's is just to take back the holy relic of reversal in her Godslayer armor, right? In that case, if she resists to the death, it doesn't matter if she dies. Anyway, it's fine as long as we take back the things, right? Justin? Katerina didn't seem to hear him and was not affected at all. Captain Justin glanced at Katerina and thought for a while before saying, Try to capture her alive. After all, she is a member of the religious order. Even if she is to be executed, she must be tried first. Of course, if the situation changes, you are allowed to make your own judgment. How can I bear to kill her? Karen smiled and said, After all, Master Pride specifically asked for Lamia's. Of course, I'll order her. After saying that, Karen strode out of the conference room. At the same time, the huge submarine also completed its landing on the seabed. Naturally, such a huge submarine couldn't really get close to the shore. However, a large number of speedboats were shot out from the submarine. Then, they drew waves and rushed to the shore. Late at night, Paladin Wasco suddenly had an ominous feeling. He opened his eyes and walked out of the room. For some reason, the night sky outside the church gave Wasco a particularly dark feeling. At the same time, a glimmer in the night sky caught his attention. The moment he identified what these glimmers represented with the fastest speed, Wasco couldn't help but show a shocked expression. At the same time, Wasco also saw Stella. At this time, Stella was wearing loose pajamas and standing in the courtyard. Tom was in the priest's arms and seemed to want to struggle out, but Father Stella held him tightly. Tom seemed to be particularly irritable tonight. Stella, what happened? Wasco walked to Father Stella at once. These souls, are they the residents of the town? More than that. Father Stella shook his head. I counted, and there are probably students from those academies as well. What's going on? Do you need to ask? Father Stella turned back and looked at Wasco, who used to be the son of his coachman, with concern. Looking at this situation, there must be a devil lurking here who wants to cause trouble in the dark. Damn it! Wasco immediately gritted his teeth and looked at the densely packed souls gathering in one direction, and in the next moment, rushed out of the church's door. There were many believers in this town. As a holy knight, it was his duty and responsibility to protect every believer of the Lord. He couldn't just watch these souls be taken away. However, the moment he stepped out of the church's door, a strong sense of dizziness hit Wasco, and he almost fell to the ground. His body had just recovered, and the exquisite and rich holy power was like a broken dam, wildly leaking out. Wasco was shocked and quickly retreated into the church to stop the damage in time. What happened outside? Wasco's face was slightly pale. I just walked out, and I felt like my soul was being directly sucked away. That's because your faith is not strong enough. Father Stella walked in front of Wasco and said seriously, Come, I have a full set of amulets here, 100 for a set. I guarantee that you'll be fine. As he spoke, the priest tore open his pajamas. Both sides of his pajamas were densely packed with all sorts of strange amulets and other similar items. There were all kinds of belief systems. Wasco's eyebrows couldn't help but twitch, and he almost couldn't control himself to jump up and beat this heretic to death. He ignored Stella and directly jumped onto the church's roof, and at the same time tried to contact the few Holy Night candidates who were temporarily staying in the town's apartment. Although the call went through, no one picked up. Wasco looked over and found that in the town, large numbers of souls were surging out, shrouded in death. Only the church was not affected. The town's population was not large, but if the students of the academy were included, there were at least 100,000 people. Faced with the fate of the town, Wasco could not help but feel anxious. That place, at this time, the souls seemed to be sucked into a whirlpool, spiraling in the night sky. Spiraling, they were finally sucked to the ground. It seemed to be a square in the center of the town. "Stella, your things are really useful?" Wasco lowered his head and shouted. "Nonsense." Father Stella coldly snorted. "They're all drawn by me. Of course they're useful. Give me a set." Wasco gritted his teeth, and without even waiting for Father Stella to respond, he jumped down, reached out and grabbed a handful of things from Stella's pajamas, and walked out of the church door resolutely. "It's really useful?" Wasco stared dumbfoundedly at the things he casually grabbed. It was a self-portrait drawn by Stella with his own soul style. "Bastard Wasco, don't think that you don't have to pay for taking my things, just because you brought me and your sister together." The priest in the courtyard was now angry. "If I don't beat the shit out of you tonight, I'll be sorry for the countless lives that died on your sister's body." Wasco was also angry and turned to leave. He really didn't have time to be crazy with Stella here. The signal from the reverse cross of fear is here, but on a wild grassland in the suburbs, a few cold-faced men dug out a black box from the mud. It seems that Lamia's buried it here of her own accord. Karen, the commander this time, sneered. She really thinks she's smart. "Sir, how could Lamia's be so stupid to stay here and wait for us to appear? She threatened us with the secrets of the religious order and the holy relic of reversal." Karen sneered and said she hoped that the religious order would imprison Master Pride and hand him over to her personally. Hearing this from Karen's mouth, the subordinates were all stunned. Is she crazy? Maybe she thought that after she got Stella, she would have the power to go against the religious order. Karen shook his head. "Stupid woman. Let's go. It seems that if Lamia's is still in the town, she would definitely stay by Stella's side." At this moment, a subordinate came back. "Sir, there's a manor up ahead. I saw Lamia's inside." "Oh. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. 1280 seconds. Chapter 1628. Karen, who originally thought that this trip would be in vain, was slightly happy after hearing his subordinate's report. But he quickly thought of something that didn't make sense. "You really saw Lamia's in the manor?" His subordinate nodded with a serious expression. "It is indeed her, and it shouldn't be an illusion, but what?" Karen frowned subconsciously. His subordinate's hesitation at this moment seemed to be the same as what he felt in his heart. His subordinate thought for a moment and said, "Lamia's was sitting on the balcony reading a book. She looked quite relaxed and didn't look nervous at all. It felt like she was deliberately telling us that she was there. And why did she deliberately bury Reverse Cross of Fear in this place? This place is not far from the manor, so I'm afraid it's a trap. Let's talk as we walk." Karen quickly made a decision in his heart. In fact, he could already vaguely see the faint light emitted by the manor at the end of the forest. "Lamia's, it seems like she really betrayed us." Karen told his subordinate his thoughts. "To be honest, from the last image transmitted by Nautilus, Father Stella, who could sink it with one blow, does indeed have shocking power. In front of this kind of power, Lamia's wavering is also something to be expected." "Sir, what do you mean?" Karen sneered. "Don't forget what Lamia's initial purpose was. She hoped to increase her merit by capturing Stella, thus avoiding the fate of being sent to Master Pride. Obviously, she failed. Stella's power is beyond everyone's expectations. Lamia's can't just return like this, because her fate will be very tragic after she returns. At this time, if it was you, what would you do?" His subordinate opened his mouth. Although he already knew what choice he would make, there were some words that could never be said directly. Looking at his subordinate's awkward expression, Karen smiled and said, "She will join Stella and then join the Holy Church." She used the holy relic of reversal as a threat, wanting the religious order to hand over Grandmaster pride. She felt that by standing on Stella's side, she had the capital to fight against the religious order. She even believed that as long as she stayed by Stella's side, she could do whatever she wanted. It's a pity that Lamias didn't expect that this time, the Cultivators Association would turn out in full force. Yes, the subordinate nodded in agreement. Maybe Lamias's threat is just a means to bluff, or maybe she is putting on an act for the Holy Church to show that she is determined to break with us. I think she really doesn't know what kind of revenge will come from this break. Lamias, you think you're smart this time. Karen smiled and said, "Come to think of it, there should be people from the Holy Church lying in ambush in that manner, right? Indeed, according to our usual practice, we would first eliminate the spies to inquire about it. But this time, it's completely out of everyone's expectations. Even I didn't know beforehand that the chief would give the order to turn out in full force. My lord, we can see the manner clearly now." Another subordinate quickly walked back at this time. A light flashed in Karen's eyes, and he said sarcastically, "I don't know how many people from the Holy Church Lamias is roped in, but according to the intelligence, this time the Holy Church did exclude one Paladin Wasco and several Paladin trainees. It's very likely that this Paladin and his students are living in this manner at this time." Listening to his superior's clear and logical analysis, the subordinate couldn't think of anything wrong at this time, but he still felt that something was wrong. However, if Paladin Wasco and his students were in the manor, it was indeed quite troublesome. After all, although Wasco was old, his combat strength didn't show any signs of weakening. In the Black Order, he could be said to be at the top of the hunting list. At this time, the only problem that the Black Order was afraid of was the Descended Angel. The Descended Angel definitely didn't exist in this town. Otherwise, with the strength of the Descended Angel, how could it let the Black Order submarine get close? Perhaps before the Black Order's combat force could land, they would have already been attacked by the Descended Angel when they were still at sea. Therefore, Karen was very confident at this time. No matter how strong Wasco is, he is still only one person now. Karen said indifferently, "And we are the 4 major regiments of the Black Order. Are we afraid of a paladin's combat strength?" The subordinate shook his head. It wasn't that they hadn't fought with a paladin before. They already had a direct understanding of the paladin's combat strength. Although the Black Order strongholds in Euroland were destroyed by the Descended Angel overnight, most of those strongholds were used to set up a diversion to confuse the Holy Church's spies. The real elites of the Black Order had always been entrenched in the powerful human country on the other side of the ocean. As long as they could complete the plan this time, and complete the things that they had prepared for 100 years, the Black Order would have the combat strength to defeat the Angels. By then, they would naturally have nothing to fear. At this time, a subordinate brought Karen a night vision goggles. Karen raised the night vision goggles and looked directly into the manor. This manor was actually small, so under the guidance of a subordinate, Karen quickly saw Lamias reading under the moonlight on the balcony. She's in a good mood. Karen sneered. I don't know if she can still smile later. Give her a surprise, Carbon. Carbon. Karen's trusted subordinate nodded at this time. The regiments under Karen's command were called New Human Independent Combat Division. They were a group of machine-like warriors who used drugs and methods of modification to open up the limits of the human body, allowing humans to evolve as a species. New Human Independent Combat Division was also the only one among all the regiments in the Black Order that were fully equipped with armor. If the higher-ups of the Night Organization were here, they would probably think that this New Human Independent Combat Division was similar to the Fenio Warrior Regiment that the late British Prime Minister spent a lot of money and resources to create. It was just that compared to the Dragon Knight armor created by the late Prime Minister, the New Human Independent Combat Division, Hess armor seemed to be a lot more powerful. Carbon waved his hand at this time, and 20 warriors wearing the blazing meteor armor that was far more powerful than the Dragon Knight armor stepped out. It was based on one of the three crystallization of the Black Order, disaster. The Homo Evolutus Independent Combat Division was controlled by a total of 99 powerful Homo Evolutus. As the leader of the Homo Evolutus Independent Combat Division, Karen was one of the first batch of experimental subjects ever since the Black Religious Order had mastered the human body modification technology. Karen's modification progress was much faster than the members of the Homo Evolutus Independent Combat Division. Karen himself also had an exclusive high-grade combat armor. In terms of performance, it was only below the three highest-grade combat armors. Using such a powerful configuration to capture lamias was like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Since Wasco might be hiding in the manor, then let's give this holy knight a surprise. Karen's eyes flashed with a hint of mockery. The Black Order has been dormant for 100 years. It's time to let the Holy Church, let the world see our strength. As the saying goes, no one knows what you've been through for 100 years, but once you become famous, you'll shock the world. This was the intention of the Black Order. Countless times, when they achieved breakthroughs in technology, they suppressed the ecstasy in their hearts. Time and time again, they surpassed the era, and time again, they kept a low profile, just so that one day they could return to the world with an invincible attitude. High-energy me-family particle cannon ready. Aim. Fire. In an instant, 20 Homo Evolutus wearing the blazing meteor battle armor, each of them carrying a large autocannon. Under the command of Captain Cabin, they pulled the trigger of the autocannon. Terrifying energy instantly gathered in the barrels of the autocannons. Karen could even feel the blazing aura of this pure energy. A bloodthirsty look flashed in his eyes. It was as if he could already see the holy knight hiding in the manor rushing out from the explosion, covered in blood. He also saw the despair of the new human independent combat master. Torturing and killing a veteran holy knight of the Holy Church was also a very interesting thing. Finally, 20 powerful beams of light instantly shot out. It's coming. Karen's pupils instantly widened, and his breathing became faster. The pleasure brought by the destruction instantly filled his brain, and his adrenaline surged. At this moment, a figure silently appeared at the Yuhua stone steps in front of the manor, and it quickly reached out its right palm. Eve. The moment Eve's right palm reached out, the center of its palm cracked open, revealing a round hole the size of a ping-pong ball. The 20 powerful beams of light strangely curved at this moment. The beams of light that were supposed to shoot out in parallel were now distorted, and because of the distortion, they started to converge. It was as if there was something attracting them. The 20 beams of light were completely swallowed by something in the end. They were directly swallowed by the round hole in Eve's palm. After swallowing the 20 beams of light, Eve's body seemed to be covered by a layer of light. Even its hair was slightly scattered, and countless stars were hanging in the air. The destruction that was supposed to happen didn't happen, and the huge explosion and shockwave that was supposed to happen didn't happen either. In the new Human Independent Combat Division formation, Karen, who was being protected by several warriors, opened his eyes wide. What did he see? Did someone just block the barrage of 20 high-energy particle cannons of the Me family with their bare hands? A strange silence appeared in the new Human Independent Combat Division formation. Each of them had the ability to see things from afar, which meant that each of them clearly saw what happened just now. This woman isn't a human. At least her arm looks like some kind of machine. Karen shivered. The uneasy feeling that he had when he was discussing with Karen instantly turned into a bad feeling, and he felt a chill down his spine. The Holy Church also has the technology to modify weapons. Doubts flashed through Karen's mind, and then he said, "It's not Wasco. Where did this woman come from?" However, Karen wasn't very afraid. The new Human Independent Combat Division had 99 warriors, and this time they were all heavily armored. At this moment, Eve suddenly jumped up in front of the manor. Like a cannonball, it rushed into the night sky at a terrifying speed and then fell down. Boom! The moment Eve landed, the ground instantly cracked, and the cracks spread out, covering the entire formation of the new Human Independent Combat Division. The cracking of the ground didn't make the new Human Independent Combat Division panic. This kind of sudden change in the terrain could be avoided with a simple jump. Only the speed and the power of the woman's fall were shocking. After landing on the ground, Eve crossed her hands in front of her chest and then waved them to the sides. Then, something seemed to extend from Eve as palms and finally converged to form two sharp blades. The Creator's private property is under attack, executing automatic defense program. Eve, as pupils flashed with purple light, and like a camera lens, her pupils contracted and expanded. Annihilate. What does she want to do? One of the new Human Independent Combat Division warriors turned on the communication device and said subconsciously. His voice wasn't loud, but it was connected to the network so the whole group could hear it at the same time. They heard his final scream. In the air, the warrior who just sent out the communication device was cut open after his scream. He didn't even have a chance to resist. Attack! 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 Karen, who had recovered from his momentary panic, shuddered violently as he shouted with a hoarse voice. Boom! Just as Karen gave the order to attack, a heat wave surged from his side. Shockingly, after a warrior was slain, his blazing meteor battle armor had been blasted apart. Orange flames appeared in the air, and along with the thunderous explosion and hot air, sparks flew everywhere. Boom! 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 It was like a person who was lost in absolute darkness and encountered an assassin in the darkness. Karen shivered as he listened to the continuous explosions. His scalp was numb, his heart was beating violently, his hands and feet were cold, and he had difficulty breathing. In the night sky, there was a beautiful figure, as if dancing with the fireworks. I'll die. The unprecedented fear made Karen forget all the advantages of the new Human Independent Combat Division. He stumbled back and almost fell down. Then, he put on his armor that was said to be only below the 3 crystallization of the Shura Society. Karen turned around and stood up like a dog. Then, the propulsion device on the back of the armor ignited, and 2 dark blue flame tails pierced through the sky. Less than half of the new Human Independent Combat Division warriors were left, and less than a minute had passed. Like fireworks, it was extremely short. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. The next chapter will be delayed. Chapter 1629. The blue battle armor had a streamlined outer shell, and its speed was close to 1 times the speed of sound. The roaring sound was extremely loud, making the quiet night unpeaceful. Sharon had no intention of turning back. The sense of crisis made his heart feel like it was being squeezed tightly and could be crushed at any moment. Even with the protection of the battle armor, his body was still cold. How should he report to Justin? Report to the chief that this operation has failed. Tell them that this operation has failed and that the battle armor division that we have spent decades to develop has just given the enemy a grand fireworks show. Then proudly say, yes, only I escape, huh? Could it be that the woman is also an angel from the Holy Church? But Sharon quickly rejected this idea. The Black Order had a special method to detect holy power, and the woman who annihilated the battle group obviously didn't have holy power. Sharon, this is the control room. I am Justin. Please report your current situation. Why is the signal of the Homo Evolutus Independent Combat Division almost gone? At this moment, the voice of Captain Justin from the submarine control room sounded in his ears. Sharon opened his mouth, but the words that were about to come out from his throat were suddenly blocked by something. He looked at the internal display in the battle armor in a daze, but there was nothing behind him. Sharon, please report your current situation. I repeat, please report your mother's situation immediately. The Homo Evolutus Independent Combat Division was wiped out. Sharon gritted his teeth and said bitterly, we found Lamia's, but at the same time, we encountered a terrifying woman. She was the one who wiped out the Homo Evolutus Independent Combat Division. Perhaps when he activated the battle armor's thrusters, half of the soldiers of the Homo Evolutus Independent Combat Division were still alive, but at this time, Sharon couldn't contact any of the soldiers in the battle group, including his most trusted subordinate, the leader of the battle group, Captain. In just a few minutes, the Homo Evolutus Independent Combat Division was wiped out. This made Sharon almost unable to accept this fact. If it wasn't for the fact that the battle armor could only be controlled automatically, he would have fainted and fallen to the ground. "What did you say?" Captain Justin's shocked voice came from the communicator. "Image. This is the image from just now. I'll send it back now." Karen's voice was hoarse as he took a deep breath. "I won't come back alone. From now on, I will activate the real-time battle feed." Turning around, facing that terrifying place again. Facing the direction of that terrifying woman, Karen's eyes were filled with determination. Now that he had fled back, his fate could be imagined. He wouldn't go back with the name of a deserter and a coward. He could only face that terrifying woman again, even if it meant dying in battle. The thrusters were activated once again, and a huge burst of energy was about to erupt. But at this moment, Karen suddenly lost consciousness. Without his command, the armor strangely stopped in the night sky, motionless. The AI program inside the armor was now checking the situation of the controller. The conclusion was that the life signs of the user of the armor, Karen, had disappeared, and this set of data was immediately transmitted back to the control room of the huge submarine in the distant ocean. That was when a large number of residents in the town began to die. At the same time, the other 3 battle regiments that were preparing to capture Father Stella also completed the landing under the command of Katerina. They would bypass the center of the town and reach the back of Father Stella's church from the edge. I wonder if Karen has completed the mission. Among the battle nuns, a woman who temporarily replaced Sister Grant and was in charge of leading the battle nuns couldn't help but whisper to Katerina at this time. "Send 2 people to follow me," Katerina suddenly said. "When Grant last communicated with me, she seemed to be in a nearby sea cave. Even if she's dead, I hope to find her body." "Right away." The temporary leader nodded, then hesitated and said, "But what about the command of the operation?" "There's nothing to command." Katerina shook her head and said, 3 battle regiments with all their combat power. There are only 2 results. Either they capture Stella or they can't. It doesn't matter whether I'm here or not. I'll leave the command of the battle sisters to you for the time being." Soon, Katerina left with 2 battle sisters. The other 2 high-ranking members of the order, who were of the same rank as Katerina, just pretended that they didn't see Katerina leaving. They agreed with Katerina's words. 3 battle regiments were dispatched to capture Stella alive. If even that failed, Katerina's presence or absence would not change the situation they would face if they failed. "Let's go." With the order, the large group was ready to go and move quickly. But at this moment, the warriors who were walking in front suddenly stopped, because a black cat was blocking in front of them at this moment. How could a cat stop so many powerful warriors? However, this cat was able to stand up and speak the human language. "We meet again, everyone." "We meet again?" Everyone was puzzled. Everyone immediately searched their memories, but they couldn't find any impression of this black cat that could talk. Of course, they wouldn't be afraid of a cat that could talk. As a member of the inhuman world, what strange things had they not seen before? But soon, the warriors in the front row of the 3 battle regiments fell down one after another. Like dominoes, the scale and speed of the fall was so fast that they didn't even have time to react in fear. Do you know, death is just like this? In less than a breath's time, no matter how bright the light was in your previous life, the moment it extinguishes, it will usher in the same kind of darkness. The black cat's voice lingered in the ears of those who were at the back of the group. It was the whisper of death. "I hope this is the last time." There was also the sound of sighs. The black cat turned around and left. Just as it crossed the beach road, they fell down in large numbers. There was no pain, no howling, as if they were just sleeping. Then they became cold corpses that gradually cooled down. In a manner, in the guest room near the forest, on the balcony, when the firelight kept shining on Lamia's face, she couldn't hear any sound. The manor was still so quiet. She could even hear the sound of insects on the grass downstairs. The slaughter in the distance was like a silent film. Is this Eve? Lamias held the binoculars in one hand and clenched the railing on the balcony with the other hand. She leaned out and said, "It's actually an entire new human independent combat division." The battle, the one-sided slaughter stopped. Nobody knew when it stopped. Lamias froze on the balcony. Her hand that was holding the binoculars suddenly dropped down. At this time, Eve slowly walked back. The dual blades in its hands were gone. Except for a trace of dust on its clothes, there was nothing strange about it. Looking at Eve, who was just downstairs, Lamias was startled. She subconsciously stepped back and bumped into the table on the balcony, knocking over the glass on the table. The sound of the glass breaking rang out clearly. Lamias suddenly became a little flustered. It was as if she had done something wrong by breaking the peace of the manor by knocking over the glass. She squatted down and quickly reached out to pick up the glass shards. But at this time, Eve's voice suddenly rang out. Lamias suddenly looked up. Eve was in front of her on the balcony, expressionless. Its cold voice rang in Lamias' ears. "Miss Lamias, I'll clean up these things. So, if there's nothing else, maybe you can go to bed early. It's late, so I hope you won't make any noise. It will affect the master's daily routine. Good night." How loud could the sound of glass falling to the ground be? Could it be compared to the explosion of the blazing meteor? But that was a silent battle. At least, the manor had maintained an abnormal silence from the beginning to the end. The loudest sound was probably the sound of the glass breaking just now. Lamias took a deep breath. She immediately turned around and walked quickly to the bed. Then, she pulled up the blanket and covered her head. During the whole process, she didn't even dare to look back at Eve. She was frantically calculating the equation in her mind. Eve easily slaughtered the new human independent combat division, and the whole process definitely didn't take more than 3 minutes. Even when the god-slaying armor was still around, Lamias knew that she could only rely on the terrain to fight the new human independent combat division, one by one. She didn't want to be like Eve, who slaughtered the new human independent combat division. The manor owner, Luaccio, was Eve's master. According to what Eve said before, she was completely willing to submit herself to the manor owner, Luaccio. The manor owner easily suppressed the paladin, Wasco. He promised that as long as she was in the vicinity of this town, she wouldn't die. So, how powerful could this manor owner, Luaccio, be? There was nothing that could be used as a reference. There was nothing at all. Lamias couldn't figure out the equation in her mind. Wait, Lamias suddenly quivered. How could such a terrifying guy protect me just because he asked me to do something? The manor owner, Luaccio, didn't even have the slightest interest in the reverse holy relic that she had. Back then, he promised to hold back the paladin, Wasco, only because she had used the composition alchemy. So, what else could she do to make him feel that it was reasonable for him to protect her? Lamias suddenly sat up, stewed. However, Eve was no longer on the balcony, and the glass fragments on the floor had been cleaned up. There was even a new glass placed on the table on the balcony. Lamias subconsciously swallowed her saliva, only feeling that she was in an unprecedented, mysterious place. The huge mystery that seemed to be impossible to uncover was the source of her fear. Forget it. Do I still have room to resist? Lamias let out a long sigh and looked at the night sky outside the balcony with mixed feelings. But at that moment, she saw a figure standing on the balcony. Luaccio, it's you? Lamias was shocked. She hurriedly lifted the blanket and quickly walked out of bed. Didn't Eve say that you were resting? The one-sided massacre, just now, didn't make any noise in the manor. She asked herself, if she had fallen asleep before the massacre, she probably wouldn't have been affected at all. I was reading for a while. Actually, I was about to fall asleep. Boss Luo smiled casually. Then, he suddenly said, "Those people just now are here to take you back, right?" Yes. Lamias didn't have the slightest intention of hiding anything. At that moment, she was as obedient as a tamed cat. "Thank you. You purposely led them here, right?" Boss Luo said again. Lamias opened her mouth, but didn't know what to say. Her heart was beating even faster. All the strength in her body seemed to have been drained. Even her teeth were slightly chattering. "It's okay." Boss Luo smiled and said, "Since I promised to protect you during this time, then no matter what happens during this time, it will be within the scope of protection. You don't blame me?" Lamias was shocked. She looked up in confusion and subconsciously asked, "Why?" She even forgot about her fear. There was only one question in her heart. "I said, I will ask you to do one thing." What can I do for you?" Lamias said self-deprecatingly. "Or rather, with your strength, what would you need a mortal like me to do? You can't be greedy for my body, right? I can't be compared to the woman beside you." "Because you are a mortal," Boss Luo said seriously. "As a mortal, you are weak enough. Therefore, with my current ability, I can do something. I plan to send you to a place and then do one thing." "You?" Lamias couldn't help but frown. "I don't understand." "Your maid can annihilate a powerful battle force of the religious order in a few minutes. In this world, is there anything you can't do? Why do you need a mortal like me?" Luocio didn't say anything. He just silently looked at Lamias. Lamias opened her mouth and finally sighed. She nodded and said, "Okay, I actually don't have a choice. Tell me, where do you want to send me, and what do you want me to do for you?" "I will send you back to the past." "What?" "Please help me find someone." At the same time, a huge light pillar shot directly to the sky from the center of the town. The light pillar was so bright that Lamias couldn't open her eyes. After a while, Lamias felt that she could open her eyes. The moment she slowly opened her eyes, she was so shocked by the scene in front of her that her mind almost went blank. The sky seemed to have been dyed blood red by something. On the ground, blood flowed like a river. Brave warriors were fighting on the battlefield tirelessly. There were human warriors, stone giants, huge beasts, and even giant snakes that spat out lava. Lightning flashed in the sky, and huge waves rose from the sea in the distance. It was as if magma had emerged from hell and was flowing on the earth. "What is this place?" Lamias was so frightened by the scene in front of her that she sat down on the ground. Suddenly, a voice like the might of the heavens sounded from the sky. "Hades, do you really want to start this war and destroy the entire kingdom of God?" Hades. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. 1380 seconds. Chapter 1630. When a huge burning fireball as tall as a person suddenly fell from the sky and made the ground explode, Lamias's consideration was no longer about whether everything in front of her was real or not. She didn't even think about what Boss Luo wanted her to do. What she should think about was how to save her own life. Because this terrible fireball was just an appetizer on the table. The real feast was still to come. Hundreds and thousands of enormous fireballs rained down like a meteor shower, wildly smashing down on the ground. Countless warriors and monsters who were fighting on the ground were killed or injured by this terrifying barrage of fireballs. God's war. The oncoming heat wave, the sound of battle that seemed to be able to make the soul tremble, and the roar of the gods who controlled the great power of heaven and earth. Lamias's face was pale. She turned around and ran. This was probably the fastest sprint she had ever done in her life. She felt that all of the potential in her body had been suppressed to the point that there wasn't a single bit left. Her normal human body had forcibly run within 900 meters of the uneven wasteland. The ultra-high intensity load made Lamias's heart like an engine that was about to explode. Her consciousness was almost blank, and she felt an unprecedented fear of the danger at this time. There was no free lunch in the world. The manor owner could protect her without caring about the cost. He even knew that she would attract the Black Order, but he didn't care. He just asked her to do one thing. But this matter was obviously going to kill her at any time, in such a terrible battlefield. Not to mention completing the task that Boss Luo asked her to do. Saving her own life was already a difficult task that was beyond the difficulty of hell. In the end, she still couldn't outrun those huge fireballs falling from the sky. When a big fireball fell behind her and then exploded, the huge airwave directly blew her body into the air and then threw her into a distant trench. At the moment, Lamia's consciousness was directly closed because of the shock of the impact. She fell to the ground and crawled. She directly fainted. She had lost consciousness, and her body was pressed against the corpse of a cyclops in the trench. But this terrifying war did not end because of her unconsciousness. This place was still the same as before. The boiling water was obviously not affected by a single drop of seawater. The sky was still burning. This war will continue until the end of time. Victory will belong to us gods. Hades, your scheme will eventually be crushed. That grand and imposing voice once again resounded in the sky, accompanied by lightning and thunder. It was an unparalleled heavenly might. In the darkness at the end of the earth, a cold voice that was not the slightest bit weak rang out. Then let's fight to the end. Zeus. The ground suddenly began to burn. Hurry up, there's still injured people here. I need food, clean water, and most importantly, medicine to stop the bleeding. Warrior, wake up. Your life is not over yet. For the glory of the gods and the survival of mankind, I command you to stand on the earth again, even if you only have one leg left. Help me, help me, help me. Light and shadow were like shuttles. She opened her eyes slightly and saw many shadows passing by in an instant. Lamia's only felt a buzzing sound in her ears, and a nauseating and dizzy feeling made her want to vomit. She struggled to prop herself up, but found that she was currently in a simple shed. There were more than a dozen seriously injured soldiers with her. Some of them were female warriors. The shocking wounds on their bodies made Lamia's have an impulse to close her eyes again, hoping to wake herself up in a dream. And there were at least 50 or 60 simple sheds like the one she was in. The sky was gray, and she could vaguely hear the sound of fighting in the distance. Lamia's knew that she was still in the terrible battlefield of the gods. This was probably a camp for the wounded at the rear, but she did not know which side it belonged to. Hades? The war of the gods. Zeus. In an instant, the voice that she heard before she fainted rang in Lamia's mind again, giving her a splitting headache. She dug out the names and the stories behind these names from her past memory. There were many myths of the ancient Greek kingdom of God in the modern world, and there were even a large number of scholars who were responsible for studying these myths. The Black Order had always been committed to overthrowing the Holy Church, so they had been sparing no effort to find useful power from various myths. But there has never been a record of a war of the gods in the modern world. Lamia's rubbed her swollen head and said to herself, even the official story of the fall of the Lord of the Sky and the death of the Lord of the Sky has never appeared. I have no idea what the final outcome of this war will be. If he did not use some kind of illusion magic on me, then he really sent me back to the distant past in this war of the gods. Lamia's suddenly quivered. Is he a god or a human? Sending a person back to the past was something that was completely beyond the scope of conventional understanding. Not to mention that Lamia's was just a human being, even if it was a master magician, even if it was the strongest cleric in the Holy Church, those powerful and human beings that Lamia's knew might not be able to understand it. I hope you can help me find a person. Luacio's voice suddenly appeared in her heart. Lamia's originally chaotic mind suddenly seemed to be sorted out and gradually became clear. That was the information she received when she traveled through time and space and came to this battlefield of the gods. As long as I can find that person, I can go back to the original time. She stood up abruptly. What is this place? After learning the way to return, Lamia's asked anxiously. Almost without thinking, she instantly grabbed a female warrior who had just woken up from the pain with her arm broken off and bleeding from a wound. The female warrior endured the pain and said subconsciously, "This is the Perseus constellation, the camp of the hero Perseus. Don't you know? Why are you dressed differently from us? Are you from a king of hell's camp? Perseus? Perseus constellation? So, this should be the formation of the gods of Mount Olympus?" Lamia's lips moved slightly as she judged her current situation as quickly as possible. Before the female warrior was about to shout, she knocked her unconscious again. She took off the female warrior's armor and put on herself. At the same time, she wiped the blood from the female warrior's wound with her fingers and smeared it on her bare skin. After picking up a broken sword and an uneven shield from the ground, Lamias lowered her head and hurriedly walked out of the camp of the wounded. She had nothing on her when she traveled through time and space this time. Even the holy relic of reversal that she had always carried with her was no longer with her. The holy relic of reversal was definitely not lost when she was unconscious. She did not bring it back at all. The moment she arrived here, Lamias had already checked her body. In other words, at this time, in order to complete Boss Luo's request, she started with a blank slate. She almost turned into a crate. But how can I find that person? Lamias, who had already walked out of the camp of the wounded and planned to retreat to the rear of the battlefield for a while, could not help but feel at a loss. At this moment, a heavy palm patted Lamias on the shoulder and asked in a deep voice, "Where are you going?" This is not the direction to the battlefield. It was a blood-stained war general. Lamias turned around and looked at the nearly 2-meter-tall figure, the terrifying blood-stained armor on his body, and a murderous look on the war general's face. She instantly gave up the idea of passing the sword to him. "You want to escape? Woman." The war general lowered his head, and a murderous look flashed across his eyes. Lamias shook her head calmly. Even on the battlefield, can a woman be allowed to solve some physiological problems? The warlord snorted coldly and slapped Lamias's face without saying a word. The force of the slap sent Lamias flying. She saw stars and vomited blood. She lay on the ground and struggled a few times before she staggered up. However, the war general instantly grabbed her hair and violently pulled her forward. "Wait, what are you trying to do? Let go of me. Let go of me. Shut up, woman." The war general turned around and punched Lamias in the abdomen. The power of the punch in the abdomen was very strong. Lamias felt as though her internal organs were all mixed together and her body went limp. However, the war general continued to pull her hair and drag her forward. In the modern world, a huge light beam shot out from the center of the town. Its brilliance was enough to render a large area of suburban land outside the city. In a manner, Boss Luo was still standing on the balcony of Lamias's room, silently watching the light beam that was born in front of him. He was holding the reverse holy relic necklace in his hand. This necklace fell to the ground directly after Lamias disappeared. "It seems that I can't take advantage of this loophole," Luocio whispered to himself. He could imagine how difficult it would be for Lamias, who had no power, to be in that place. Strictly speaking, what he hoped Lamias could do was equal to creating a miracle. "Master," Miss Servant Girl's voice came from behind. Miss Servant Girl walked over slowly and glanced at Lamias's room in confusion. Just a moment ago, Boss Luo left directly in front of her eyes, seemingly in a hurry. "Where's Lamias?" Yi asked softly at this time. Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "I asked her to do something for me as a reward for protecting her." Miss Servant Girl glanced at the reverse holy relic in her master's hand again. She stroked her hair and suddenly said, "How difficult is it?" Boss Luo shook his head, then thought for a while and said, "When she comes back, I will make some adjustments to her protection depending on whether she completes it or not." Miss Servant Girl nodded. Boss Luo said, "If she meets my expectations, then help her to completely solve the problem of the Black Order." "Okay." Miss Servant Girl still nodded. Solving the problem of the Black Order would not be difficult for Miss Servant Girl. Only the so-called completely mentioned by Boss Luo was something that Miss Servant Girl would take the time to consider. Luocio suddenly smiled at this time and stretched out his hand. Miss Servant Girl understood and stepped forward, naturally placing her palm in her master's palm. Luocio looked at the light column in front of him and said, "I probably can't sleep tonight. Let's go for a walk." On the sea, in the control room of the huge submarine, there was dead silence at this time. Beside the beach road, a large number of fallen figures appeared on the screen of the control room at this time. Shock, anger, and fear flashed in Captain Justin's eyes. He only felt a chill go straight to his brain. 3 of the most powerful battle groups of the Black religious congregation had died, just like that, Those people didn't even have time to send back a single word of what had happened. The scene on the screen was even captured by the detector deployed by the submarine. What on earth happened? Captain Justin slumped on his chair powerlessly. The communication device he carried in his ear was actually connected to the chief of the Black Order. But at this time, Captain Justin could only hear the increasingly heavy breathing of the old chief. The silence of the chief made Captain Justin feel like he was sitting on pins and needles at this time. Until, on the screen, a huge light column appeared. The light instantly filled everything in the control room and reflected on the faces of every crew member. Captain Justin suddenly quivered and couldn't help but ask bitterly, "Chief, what do we do now?" At this time, the picture suddenly changed. On the screen, the horrifying, ugly face of Master Pride appeared. Captain Justin looked at this ugly face that was becoming more and more disgusting with mixed feelings, his eyebrows knitted together. But before he had time to speak, Master Pride's eyes suddenly shot out a fanatical look and said excitedly, "Found it! It's enough for me to activate the final source of energy that I've refined. Do you see that light column? It's so wonderful. I can feel the enormous energy it's emitting. If I'm not wrong, it should be a vision that gathers a large amount of souls and life force. Seize it! Seize it! You must seize it! We can't get close at all," Captain Justin said furiously. "Anyone who gets close will die in an instant. That's your problem. I only want it." Master Pride snorted at this time and directly turned off the communication device. "How dare you?" Captain Justin immediately smashed the electronic dashboard on the armrest beside him with a punch. "Justin." At this time, the chief of the order, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. "Activate the combat soldier in warehouse number 01. Captain Justin was stunned and said subconsciously, "But we don't have enough people to operate it now." "It's okay," the chief said slowly. "This time, I'll personally control the combat soldier. It'll be more compact if I control it alone than if there are more people controlling it. Just do as I say." "Understood." Captain Justin clenched his teeth and quickly reached out to press a button on the control panel in front of him. In the depths of the submarine, in a secret and dark warehouse, hundreds of faint green lights suddenly lit up. They were like pairs of icy green eyes staring at each other. What a rich life force and soul force. Master Pride was standing on the deck of the submarine after it emerged from water. He looked at the light column in the town in the distance with a surprised expression on his face. He said with a light smile, "With it, my injuries should be able to recover a lot. This is good stuff." But at this time, a man's voice slowly came, which almost made Master Pride's heart jump out of his chest. "Are you that Mr. Visitor from outer space who brought the composition alchemy?" Master Pride suddenly turned his bloated body and saw that behind him, a man and a woman had appeared without him knowing. They came hand in hand. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. It's late, it's late. I ate some wine for dinner and then fell asleep. I only woke up when it was almost 10:30. I'm still under the bed. Chapter 16:31. On the deck, the salty sea breeze blew, and Master Pride's eyes, one big and one small, narrowed at the same time. Someone, not just one, but two, approached him at the same time and appeared behind him without him noticing at all. This caused Master Pride to feel a chill run down his spine. At the same time, it also made him realize that after he fell into this subworld, the suppression of the subworlds was too severe. But very quickly, the unhappiness of being suppressed by the subworld was swept away by the beauty in front of his eyes. Without a doubt, Master Pride was the most extravagant and lascivious type. His greed for pleasure was almost the only motivation that drove him to reach the pinnacle of the subworld he came from, and it was also the only motivation. Possessing an endless desire and being willing to do anything to achieve the desire in his heart meant that this person was willing to put in an unimaginable amount of effort. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Master Pride's mouth cracked open, and his ugly cheeks trembled a few times. Who would have thought that this bastard Charles was hiding such a top-notch product, and yet he didn't give it to me to enjoy? The eyes of Master Pride, who came from another world, were shining. Because of the lust in his heart, he couldn't hold back his saliva, and it even seeped out of his lips. But under his gaze, driven by lust, one could vaguely see a hint of coldness. Driven by lust, but not enslaved by it. He even turned his endless lust into motivation. This was the terrifying part of Master Pride. Once upon a time, countless opponents thought that lust was Master Pride's only weakness. More often than not, besides giving away the women that Master Pride played with, they also gave away their own lives. Charles? The young man holding the blonde woman's hand on the deck thought for a moment and said, "That's the name of the chief of the Black Order, isn't it?" Master Pride was all smiles as he said, "That's right. Useless Charles, Dying Charles. These are all names I like to call him. So you're not Charles's men? Why are you on this submarine?" The young man, Boss Luo, calmly replied, "Currently, we're here for you, sir." "Me?" Master Pride couldn't help but laugh. "No matter what you've come to beg me for, I'll agree to it." "Young man, I like your sincerity." "Agree?" Luaccio mulled over the meaning of this sentence. Master Pride said arrogantly, "I don't know where you found out about me, but I think you're the same as Charles from the Black Order. You want to learn how to use alchemy from me. This is an ability that only I can give you in this world. For the sake of the gift you gave me, I promise you, greedy young man, I can feel that you and I are the same type of person. From your eyes, I can see a different kind of desire, a desire to possess the things you like." "Gift?" Boss Luo was startled at first, and then he looked at the servant girl thoughtfully. He understood the meaning behind Master Pride's words, and he couldn't help but shake his head. He then whispered in the servant girl's ear, "I thought something like this wouldn't happen to us." The servant girl smiled indifferently at first, and then she said indifferently, "After all, it's essentially a powerful soul that walks in the void, so it's more or less immune. Besides, Master has always restrained himself." Boss Luo opened his mouth. He didn't know what the previous store manager was like, but it was obvious that he was too low-key in the servant girl's words. "Is this the so-called product of alchemy in this world?" Master Pride's eyes shone again. What a rare masterpiece. Although the technique used isn't that great, it can't withstand the perfection of the soul that drives this puppet. TSK. I've played with alchemy puppets before, but I've never seen one of this level. Greedy fellow, I'm more and more satisfied with your sincerity. This puppet is your work, right? Tell me, what do you want from me? Is it the technique of structural alchemy from another world? If you have more perfect puppets like this, I can consider recruiting you as my apprentice. Don't think that being my apprentice is a shameful thing. You may not know, but in my original world, how many people were as humble as insects in order to become my apprentice? Although it's a powerful soul that can walk in the void, in terms of ugliness, it's even more ugly than Asmodeus, the servant girl said expressionlessly. Perhaps you were born in the world of all mythical civilizations. Compared to Asmodeus, you'll be more suitable for the crime of pervert. Asmodeus? Master Pride subconsciously furrowed his brows. He felt like he had heard this name somewhere before. But in the crevice of the dimension, time didn't count, and he couldn't feel the passage of time. Only memories were growing. In the vast sea of memories, Master Pride vaguely felt that he should have heard of the name Asmodeus before, maybe in a subworld that he had explored before. Of course, he could recall it, but that would require him to reorganize his memories, which was really troublesome. The servant girl didn't say anything. She just put on a pair of white stockings on her clean and dust-free hands. But Boss Luo suddenly waved his hand and shook his head. The servant girl glanced at her master in surprise. Luaccio said indifferently, "I haven't felt this way for a long time. My mood is slightly different from the ups and downs in the past. The last time I felt this way was when I was in front of my father's grave." "Master?" The servant girl couldn't help but be surprised. "Do you know what this means?" Boss Luo said in a low voice, "This means your position in my heart is much more important than I thought. I can also be angry." Angry. This was the first time Yu Yi heard such words from her master. She had never heard Luaccio say such words. While her heart trembled, something seemed to break out of the ground, trying to break through the shackles under her rational soil. "You stand there." Luaccio waved his hand. The servant girl's face softened instantly. She quietly retreated behind Boss Luo and looked at her master's figure. Master Pride suddenly felt that something was wrong. He didn't know when the sea breeze had stopped, and even the waves on the sea had stopped as well. The immutable seawater seemed to have solidified in an instant. The cold glint in Master Pride's eyes that was hidden in the endless depths of the sea suddenly erupted. He put his palms together. The circle representing structural alchemy appeared on the back of his palms at the same time. Two blue and white electric arcs shot out from his palms and hit the submarine's deck. In the blink of an eye, the metal deck of the submarine began to change. Two gigantic metal skulls quickly emerged from the metal deck on either side of Master Pride. Just the exposed metal head was already as tall as a human. If it was completed, it would probably be a huge metal puppet. It was a pity that the will of the submerged world suppressed it too much. Otherwise, Master Pride would be able to create hundreds of similar metal dolls in a short period of time. At his peak, Pride controlled no less than 1,000 huge metal dolls and swept through his submerged world. He single-handedly created an empire that lasted for hundreds of years. Don't take out this kind of toy. Luochio waved his hand casually at this moment. The heads of the two huge metal dolls sank into the metal deck of the submarine in an instant. When the refining process was reversed in an instant, Master Pride's clasped hands were like magnets of the same pole, and they automatically bounced off in an instant. The circle of truth, representing structural alchemy, on the back of his palms started to burn. The circle of truth that he had painstakingly obtained started to collapse on a large scale at this moment. This feeling was so painful that Master Pride couldn't help but wail in agony. The crazed chill in his eyes had already dimmed and was replaced by fear that he had never felt before in his life. You. Luochio walked over slowly at this moment. I have something that I asked a young lady to do for me. As an additional reward for her, if she can complete the task I entrusted to her, I intend to hand you over to her. Of course, if she can't complete the task I entrusted to her in the end, I intend to let you go because there is no direct conflict between you and me. The reason why I came to you in advance is because if that young lady can complete the task, I can give her the reward immediately. That's all. Don't come over. Master Pride couldn't help but retreat. He had already taken a few steps back before he could react. That's what I thought. Boss Luo shook his head. That's really what I thought. In fact, if that young lady can't complete the task I entrusted to her in the end, I'll even compensate you as an apology. Master Pride crashed into a hatch of the submarine behind him. He couldn't retreat anymore and sat down on the ground. There's a kind of great horror called this moment. You might think that because you fell here, you were suppressed by this world Araya and couldn't use your strength. That's why you were forced into this situation. That's why you feel resentful. Boss Luo had already walked in front of Master Pride and lowered his head to look at him. But I want to tell you that even if you're in the crevice of this dimension, facing me, you don't have any ability to resist. Surpasser. Master Pride's face was pale, and his voice couldn't help but tremble. You're Surpasser who's reached the limit of power. Let me go, I didn't mean to offend you. That's the source of my power, the trait of my soul. I can't change it, but I've been very careful. I'm willing to submit to you. Really, even if it's my soul, I'll still be willing to let you enslave me. Do you know why I said those words just now? Luochio shook his head. Even I was a bit surprised when I said those words. I shouldn't have said those words. Pride, do you know why this is? Why? Because of me. Boss Luo's gaze instantly became muddled. It seems like you're really angry. As he said that, under Master Pride's fearful gaze, Luochio reached out his hand and pointed his finger at Pride's forehead. Time will slow down for you. Perhaps a minute in the outside world will be thousands or even tens of thousands of years in your spiritual world. There will be an unprecedented reality waiting for you. Everything that you're afraid of or the terror that you've brought to others, everything will be repeated on you. But your spirit won't collapse because of this. Your spirit won't be tempered and become stronger because of this. When you wake up, I'll still treat you as a reward and hand you over to that lady. His finger left. Master Pride slumped onto the ground. His eyes were empty and lifeless. He just sat there like a pile of rotten meat. After a while, Miss Maid slowly walked to Boss Luo's side. She said in a low voice, "What a pity. His soul is dimming little by little. A soul that can walk in the void is very valuable. The soul of a powerhouse is gone. Even if it's gone, it can still be nurtured." Boss Luo reached out and stroked Miss Maid's face. He said softly, "Only this beauty can't be blasphemed in front of me. Master is rarely like this." Miss Maid lowered her head and leaned on her master. Boss Luo shook his head. "It seemed to light just now. It's really not suitable for me." "Not suitable?" Miss Maid narrowed her eyes, but made my heart beat faster. Right at this moment, Master Pride's body, his chest suddenly shone with a bright light, as if something was about to leave his body. Boss Luo and Miss Maid, who felt this strange movement, looked over at the same time. In their vision, this light didn't leave Master Pride's body. Instead, it came from Master Pride's soul struggling to come out. The ball of light finally broke through Master Pride's body and floated on the deck, bathing in the night. Boss Luo sized it up and then fell into deep thought. At this moment, the ball of light bathed in the night, and starlight changed little by little. Gradually, it transformed into a petite figure. Petite but exquisite. She wore a retro female long dress from an ancient European palace. "Miss Loya." Miss May called out a name subconsciously. Boss Luo shook his head. This girl wasn't Loya. She was Araya. Perhaps she was Araya from Master Pride's original world. Chapter 1632. Boss Luo had seen a few Araya in different subworlds, but the one he was in contact with the most was naturally number 003 Araya in this subworld. Of course, if number 003 Araya had feelings, he wouldn't want to be summoned by Boss Luo. This client's daddy was too hard to please. That was probably it. Farewell. The girl who broke free from Master Pride's soul, wearing an ancient court dress, had lifeless eyes. She was obviously different from the other Araya that Boss Luo had met. Intuitively, the memory of this Araya seemed to have been damaged. So, it should be the embodiment of the world will of the subworld where Pride is. Miss Maid was now carefully sizing up the unknown number Araya in front of her and was lost in thought. Boss Luo was also observing Miss Maid and was also lost in thought. Yi almost immediately thought that this unknown number Araya was Loya. However, after she realized that it was Araya in her consciousness or even in her subconscious, the impression that Loya and Araya looked similar had been distinguished. She didn't associate Araya with Loya anymore. This was a sudden change for Boss Luo, but at the same time, it was also a change that Yi didn't notice. "I've seen something similar." Miss Maid pulled back her hair that was blown away by the sea breeze and said, "Some powerful creatures that walk in the crevices of dimensions don't explore the subworlds gently. They use the simplest and most violent means to directly defeat the world will of the subworld. Obviously, powerful creatures that can walk in the crevices of dimensions can't directly defeat the world will of the subworld, which is Araya." "You mean Pride defeated the world will of the subworld in his own subworld?" Boss Luo was lost in thought. Miss Maid shook her head. "It shouldn't be. Judging from the strength of Pride's soul, he doesn't have such ability. But if this girl is indeed the world will of his original subworld, then there's only one possibility. He eroded the origin of his own subworld." Boss Luo frowned. Miss Maid nodded. "Although I don't know what method he used, I'm afraid it's not a conventional method. It's very likely that it was accompanied by the blood of the entire civilization. Pride's desire is incomparably huge. A guy who can control such a desire is very vicious." Boss Luo shook his head and looked at the motionless girl in front of him. After she was swallowed, she was in a state where she couldn't be refined by Pride. Coincidentally, Pride was in his hands and fell into a world of fear. Therefore, the girl instinctively felt the opportunity and successfully broke free. If the world will of a subworld is plundered, then what about this subworld? Boss Luo asked curiously. Miss Maid said, "A new world will be born. Unless the entire subworld is completely wiped out, it will still be reborn if only the civilization is destroyed. In addition, the world will is actually a kind of super high standard currency. Currency? Boss Luo couldn't help but be startled. Nowadays, there were fewer and fewer things that could surprise him, and the things that really surprised him were things that really shocked him. Miss Maid nodded and then waved her hand. A thick account book appeared in her hands. She opened it, and the pages rustled. Miss Maid read softly. In the old days, the master of the heavenly court, also known as the Jade Emperor, used 9,999 sources of world will in exchange for a spiritual space that could evolve and grow. It was called the immortal world. Boss Luo's expression gradually became strange. Immortal? Immortal world? Miss Maid paused and glanced at her master. Then she turned to another page and said in a flat voice, "In the new days, the master of the heavenly kingdom used 4,000 sources of world will in exchange for the exclusive right to use the heavenly kingdom of God, and then he maintained the priority of using it in a way of leasing." In the old days, new days? Luocio frowned subconsciously and said in a low voice, "Exclusive. Right to use?" Miss Maid explained, "Before other customers bid less than 4,000 sources of world will, the heavenly kingdom of God will become a commodity that can be supplied. It won't be actively shown to customers." Luocio nodded with some understanding. Then he asked in confusion, "Suppose I have more than 4,000 sources of world will, do I also need to exchange for the heavenly kingdom of God?" Miss Maid said indifferently, "Then we will take back the heavenly kingdom and terminate the transaction with the current master of the heavenly kingdom. Because this is not like the immortal world, which is a one-time transaction. Of course, we can also create another similar heavenly kingdom of God, but generally we don't mind creating it because we will lose the original profit. In the same way, if the customer has more than 9,999 sources of world will and wants the immortal world, we can also recycle or recreate it. Of course, because the immortal world is a one-time transaction, we can recycle it by discussing with the master of the immortal world about another transaction, or we can directly sell it. I suggest we sell it directly." Boss Luo, who felt that his world view had been refreshed again, rubbed his eyebrows. Boss Luo hadn't looked through the account book of the shop for a long time. At first, he thought that an account book might record all the transactions in a subworld at most. But obviously, he was wrong. The account book couldn't be finished, and it was boring. Boss Luo sighed in his heart, praising the maid for doing such a good job. He signaled Miss Maid to keep the account book. "All right," Miss Maid suddenly mentioned, "this kind of source of world will, other than being the highest standard currency for the shop, will also be circulated in the hands of the powerful beings in the dimensional void. For them, the source of world will is the highest standard currency, but only a few powerful beings have it. Under normal circumstances, it is very difficult for the powerful beings that have advanced to the dimensional crevice to have the means to harvest this kind of source of world will." Boss Luo nodded, looking at the walking gold coin box in front of him. Looking at Araya, who was in an unknown subworld, he couldn't help but think about how to deal with it. This Araya had escaped from Pride's hands and was currently in the state of an ownerless object. Of course, it could also be said that it belonged to itself, but its current situation was that it had lost most of its memories, only some simple instincts, and couldn't even judge many things. It couldn't even make effective transactions. For the shop owner, any income outside of the transaction contract couldn't be used as an offering to the altar. While he was thinking about how to deal with it, a breeze blew gently, and on the deck, a blue-haired, blue-eyed girl in a long dress stood quietly. Intelligent multipurpose manager Araya, number 003. Before the girl finished her opening speech, Boss Luo had already waved his hand to stop the girl from introducing herself. Boss Luo stared into number 003, Araya's eyes. "You came for her, your sister?" "Confirm." For some reason, looking at the current number 003, Araya, Luocio had a feeling that he saw something called pitiful in the other's eyes. Of course, this was probably just an illusion. Perhaps it was an illusion brought about by his habit of anthropomorphizing the altar all this time. Number 003, Araya's goal was very clear, It was indeed for this seriously damaged source of world will. Using number 003, Araya's words. All Araya were sub-managers born from a huge, unimaginable special system. And then this sub-manager that was plundered by pride was injured and needed to be repaired. If the repair was successful, in the endless dimensions, a new civilized world would be born. As one of the sub-managers, it had the obligation to rescue any source of world that was damaged. Is the possibility of repairing a high? Luaccio thought for a while and asked. Number 003 Araya directly said, you can repair it by copying all my data, but after the repair, the civilization that it spawns will use the current civilization as a blueprint. I need a longer time to let the new civilization branch out. The most conservative estimate is that it will take 3 civilization processes. Boss Luo thought for a while and said, if you don't retrieve it, will there be any impact? Number 003 Araya said, in theory, no. The current subworld civilization process has reached its limit. The destruction of civilization will begin after the natural death of the Terminator. So in theory, it will be very difficult for the new spawn civilization to break through the current perfection level. The rough calculation error is within plus or minus 3%. Boss Luo remembered that the completion level of number 003 subworld was about 47%. The error of 3 points was a minimum of 44% and a maximum of 50%. He shook his head. Even if it's a positive error, it's only 50%. Number 003 Araya said, exceeding the current perfection level is an improvement. Any improvement is the foundation of the final success. So, you still want to save it, right? Boss Luo smiled and said, you just care about my attitude. Number 003 Araya was silent for a moment and finally nodded. You can recalculate or guide, or even try to find out if this world still has the potential to evolve. Boss Luo suddenly said, anyway, there's still some time before the Terminator. You don't have to rush to prepare for the restart of civilization. In fact, it won't have much impact on you if it's delayed by a few decades, or early by a few decades. The time needed for a civilization to reach its peak is at least a few decades, a few hundred times, or even more. Number 003 Araya didn't speak, but his eyes suddenly flashed. The pitiful gaze that Boss Luo felt seemed to become stronger. I have other uses for the source of will of this world. Boss Luo waved his hand. Don't worry, I'll treat it well. I won't be like this pride. Number 003 Araya nodded silently. There's nothing else to do here. Boss Luo said at this time. The meaning was very clear. Number 003 Araya suddenly said, maybe you can stimulate the completion level of the civilization core through the way of the upheaval of civilization. But this is a risky action. The risk of failure is more than 70%, and it will even destroy the current perfection level data. This is something you should think about. Boss Luo waved his hand. Since your ultimate goal is to create perfection, then you should use any means. Since there's no major breakthrough in the absolutely safe evolution mode in the short term, why don't you try to find ways to correct the wrong mode? Of course, whether you want to do it or not depends on your own thinking. I won't use my authority to force you to change the original script that has already been designed. You've already changed it, and more than once. Respected source authority holder. Number 003 Araya's pitiful eyes suddenly had a sense of bitterness. It must be an illusion or something. Boss Luo also felt that his words just now were a little unconvincing. Then he said self-deprecatingly, okay, I was bluffing. I did do something to you. I'm sorry. Your authority is higher than mine. You don't have to apologize to me. Araya shook his head. I'm just a management tool under the system. I serve for the authority. There's really nothing else to do here. Boss Luo shook his head. He didn't intend to continue arguing with no. 003 Araya. Then he thought about it and said, don't worry. This time I won't let the new script have too many changes. I'll try to minimize the impact. Just treat it as my personal compensation to you last time when I secretly set up the ending. Number 003 Araya was silent for a moment. His figure suddenly faded away, and his last words were, goodbye. The sea breeze returned to its original gentleness. On the deck of the huge Black Order submarine, there was now only Boss Luo and Miss Maid, other than the already broken shop Master Pride. Boss Luo slowly exhaled, looked at Yu Yi, and suddenly laughed. Say, do I look like an unscrupulous boss who exploits a little girl who just joined the company? Miss Maid didn't say anything. She just thought about it and said, Master, to what extent do you plan to reduce the impact? Wait a little longer. Luocio thought about it and said, I'm waiting for Lamia's to come back, and I should be able to see her soon. I have this feeling. As he said that, Boss Luo turned his gaze to the light pillar in the middle of the town. And at this moment, the huge submarine's deck began to crack, piece by piece. Then, the platform in the cabin began to rise. One by one, silver metal dolls about 5 meters tall, along with the rising platform, finally appeared. These tall, silver metal dolls suddenly squatted down, and then the thrusters on their backs instantly fired. They instantly soared into the sky. At the same time, in the submarine, the chief of the Black Order, Charles, was putting on a silver helmet on his head. His cerebral cortex was surging crazily again. 200 ultimate soldiers. Only I can perfectly control them all at once. Chief Charles muttered at this time. Only someone as strong as me can do it. I need a stronger body that can support my strong psychic power. The world should crawl under me. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. Try to write the next chapter before 12.